All right, just waiting for a few people to join the line. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down college football week 11 on a Wednesday night, 7 o'clock live stream Eastern time. We come your way at this time each and every week to talk college football. We've got about 10 or 11 people on the line, hopefully more to join. I apologize for not sending out a notification for tonight's live stream. For you old timers that join us each and every week, Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Unfortunately, I was just so busy today. Did not get it out this morning. I actually wanted to shoot a promo video to let you know what we had in store for tonight's show, which includes Claire Crawford talking Ohio State football. We've got Dan Rubin from Eagles Unlimited to talk of the BC Clemson game on Saturday night in Chestnut Hill, and also Cam Underwood from State of the U to talk Miami taking on Georgia Tech this week. And of course, tons of huge matchups in college football. The phone lines will be open and are open right now at 860-325-3687. I'll put that number in the live chat, 860-325-3687. If you are joining us for the first time, whether it's live or after the video posts to my YouTube channel at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and you have yet to see anything from our channel, and you love college football, and you understand it's November, it's the most important month of the college football season, this is your place to be. We bring you the best discussion, debate, and analysis in college football each and every day. I've got a... Excuse me for making sure I get this call right, because we all have sorts of issues with the the line here. Hang on just a second. Oh, whoever it is, please call back. I am rushing as fast as I can. I just got home from work. I wanted to make this 7 o'clock live stream happen on time. And therefore, I'm throwing on lights and firing up computers and getting the second laptop ready for the live chat. And it's just not happening all well at the moment. So I've got lines going all over the place that are tangled up. So whomever called me, give me another call. I've got you all set. 860-325-3687. And again, we've got Claire Crawford coming our way to talk Ohio State, Michigan State, noon in East Lansing on Saturday. Boston College with a chance to win the ACC. So keep this in mind. Yes, Boston College is a 20-point underdog against Clemson. We don't think about Clemson or Boston College, I should say, competing for an ACC championship, but they have one loss in conference. Clemson has none. That means if they win the head-to-head meeting, for as unlikely as that seems, Boston College would control the ACC Atlantic Division. This is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, DeAndre, how you doing, Mark?
Hey, DeAndre, how you doing? We're having a bit of a slow start here, trying to get things together, but glad you gave us a call.
Yeah, I can't talk long tonight. I got a couple questions.
Okay.
First off, what do you think about LSU being ranked number 7? Second, what if Auburn beats Georgia in Alabama and Alabama loses to Georgia in the championship game? What would happen?
All right.
Will put them ranked, or how would you put them ranked?
All right, so we'll deal with Auburn, or we'll deal with LSU first and foremost. So LSU is number 7 by the playoff committee. They are ranked ahead of 8, 9, and 10, who are all one-loss teams. That would be West Virginia, Ohio State, and Washington State, not in that order. West Virginia, Washington State, Ohio State at 8, 9, and 10. I have LSU at number 8, so I'm not too far off in regards to my thought process as well. Is that LSU, sure, they got tagged with a second loss, but I don't know who wouldn't get tagged with a second loss. Now, the surprise in that is that they lost that badly at home against Alabama, 29-0. They didn't lose 24-20 and be credited with a close loss, a competitive game. They got blown out against Alabama. So I didn't know how that would be evaluated. What that basically tells us is that the committee is saying Alabama is the best team in the country by far, and they may be right. So there's a difference here, and I talked about this when I made my college football playoff predictions. In terms of my predictions of what the rankings would be this week, DeAndre, there's a difference between being ranked high and having a path or a road to the playoff. So LSU, they're number 7 according to the playoff committee, but they have no path. They have no chance to get there. There are teams ranked behind them that have a path. They have a way to get there. So even though they're ranked that high, they pretty much blew it last week. So I don't have a huge issue with it. You know as well as I do that some of their wins aren't as impressive now as they were at the time. Beating Miami, who was 8th ranked in the country at the time, we know that Miami's not the 8th best team in the country. I don't know that they're the 28th best team in the country or the 38th best team in the country. So that's not an impressive win.
I tried to tell everybody, but okay.
But yeah, at the time, that was credited as a very important win, an impressive win. And then the Auburn game, Auburn just barely slipped back into the top 25, beating Texas A&M this past Saturday. But they've lost 3 games. They lost to Mississippi State. They lost to Tennessee, talking about Auburn. So that game's not as impressive anymore. Losing to Florida looks worse on LSU's schedule. So LSU's schedule is being bogged down now. It's not as impressive as it once was, but it's still a pretty impressive schedule. And it's the weight of the SEC and it's the weight of Alabama that's putting LSU in the place that they are, according to the committee, at number 7. Again, I only have them at number 8, so I can't be too critical. As far as your scenario, okay, if Auburn beats Georgia this week, then they beat Alabama. So that would still send Alabama to the SEC championship game, correct?
Right.
Yes. And then you're saying that Georgia, with 2 losses, would beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. So they both would have 2 losses then.
Right.
Okay. What would happen? Well, you got to play out the rest of the scenario, DeAndre. So who wins the Big Ten?
Let's go with Michigan.
Michigan wins. They win out. They only have 1 loss. Who wins the ACC? Clemson. All right. I thought you'd say that. Not too tough of a call. Okay. Undefeated Clemson. Okay. The Big 12 winner. What happens in the Big 12?
Well, that's another interesting situation. What happened to watch Oklahoma beat West Virginia, and then 2 weeks later or a week later, West Virginia turns around and beat Oklahoma, or vice versa?
Well, I'm kind of playing along, and what you the way I believe you have this headed is you are trying to determine, is the committee going to select a 2-loss SEC champion or even 2 teams with 2 losses from the SEC and leapfrog them above 1-loss conference champions. So if I'm playing along, you want Oklahoma to win out or West Virginia to win out, either one of them with 1 loss.
Right.
And what's happening with Notre Dame?
They're going to win out too.
Okay. And then Washington State's going to win out, and they only have 1 loss as well.
Right.
Okay. I believe Washington State's going to get left behind because they just don't have the quality in the conference. Unfortunately for them, that would be impressive to go 12-1, only lose 1 game to USC by 3 points, but they just would not have the quality wins because there's really nobody else in the conference playing that well. Everybody's got at least 3 losses right now. So I think Washington State would be eliminated. So we're down to Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Michigan. So, wow, we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams in play for 4 spots. Well, I think Alabama would be eliminated. They just lost the SEC championship game, and it was a 2nd loss. So Alabama's gone. So you're down to Georgia. So basically, the committee would make a decision as to whether Notre Dame and Clemson, they're in. They've got no losses. They're in. So the committee is looking at 2 spots between Oklahoma, Michigan, and Georgia. I think that they may elevate Georgia past Oklahoma even with a second loss, if they come back and beat Alabama and take them to go to the playoff over Oklahoma. That's possible.
Wow. Okay.
But that would be a dilemma. That would be a dilemma that we would all argue and argue and argue. And the SEC people would say, we've got the best conference, even though the team's got 2 losses. They just beat Alabama. They should be in. Versus many of us, me included, would say, let's give it to the team that only lost 1 game and won a conference championship.
Right.
That's an interesting scenario. You're putting a lot on those Auburn Tigers.
Well, I'm not saying it's going to happen. But look, last year.
They did it last year.
Yeah, but this is what I don't get about people, right? Last year, Auburn lost to Clemson. Everybody was like, well, Clemson played them early in the year. The quarterback was new to the system. So they are, how you say it, not overhyped, but Auburn didn't have a chance to develop. So they would beat Clemson. That's what a lot of people said last year. Later on in the year, Auburn probably would beat Clemson. Well, you could say the same thing about, let's say, if Clemson played Texas A&M now, again, right now, like how they playing right now, Clemson might blow Texas A&M out compared to only beating them by 2 points. We really don't know, but we can just assume that. Just like people assume that Auburn would have beat Clemson last year when Auburn got hot and beat Georgia and Alabama at the end of the year. So a lot of times we assume that stuff will happen, and we really don't know. And we don't know how this is going to end up. Auburn might get hot and beat everybody again like they have in the past. And we'll be sitting there looking, scratching our heads, well, who the hell getting in?
Well, that's a scenario that nobody's talking about.
Yeah. And it might be very well that West Virginia beats Oklahoma and Morgantown, and then a week later, they come back and lose to Oklahoma. I mean, we all just don't know. But that's what makes college football fun compared to the NFL, knowing that my Steelers might get there and lose to the Patriots because it always happens. I mean, we just don't know what's going to end up happening at the end of the day. And that's what makes it so fun and a great debate,
So to you, the college setup's better than the NFL?
Yeah, well, I think it's more exciting. That's why I love the regular season. Everybody wants to have 8 teams. I didn't like the old system where we had all these, where the AP just voted. I like the new system where you got 4 teams that the computers generated it and told us who the best teams were. Now, like, I think it was when Miami beat Nebraska, essentially, that Nebraska lost to Colorado. Now, I didn't think Nebraska deserved to get in. Maybe they should have played Oregon that year. But I liked it a lot better when the computers had something to do with it, too. I mean, you take a part of them from the scenario, and they'll tell us who the best team is. But I didn't like the back in the 80s. Even in Clemson, the year they won in 81, they was undefeated, but everybody else had 2 losses. So, you can say, yeah, they were undefeated. But there's been times that Miami, I think I told you this before, a couple of those years that Miami won in the 80s, you could have put Texas or Auburn as national champs because they only lost 1 game. So, it's hard to say who's the better team. But I just love this new system because we always debating. And I wish everybody could get a playoff. And I wish Big 12 would go get 2 more teams and put them in there and have a neutral site game. And we fight to see who's going to win. Is there going to be an upset December 1st? Because Clemson could very well lose to Pitt. If Pitt's there, because Pitt's going to be Clemson in the last couple of years. So, and Pitt gets up for big games. I mean, look what they almost did in Notre Dame this year. I mean, if you rank number 2 in the nation, I wouldn't want to play Pitt because then they beat Miami at number 2 and Clemson at number 2. So,
yeah, they beat Miami and they beat Clemson at number 2. They beat Penn State, who went on to win the Big Ten championship and go to the Rose Bowl the same year that they beat Clemson. They somehow They somehow figured out a way to lose to 5 other teams, but they lost to Clemson, or they beat Clemson and Penn State that year.
And I think even a year or two before that, West Virginia was ranked really high, and they went and lost to Pitt. Like I think, and
2007.
Yeah. So I mean, you never know. Pitt might just say, "Hey, ACC championship game. We got a chance to go to Orange Bowl. Let's go beat Clemson." You just never know what's going to happen. And Harvard might take it like that too. Hey, we did this last year. Let's go beat Georgia, and then let's go beat Alabama in 2 weeks. I mean, it has happened.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know how, because Tua was hurt. Tua was having some issues. I know. They still got hurt, but who said they ain't gonna do it? Auburn still got just as many 5 or 4-star players as anybody else in the country does.
Auburn does?
Quarterback was Holly. Yeah. Hadn't it been a top recruit?
Not quite, DeAndre. They're up there, but not quite at that level. They haven't quite recruited with Alabama and Georgia. Alabama and Georgia have had number 1 to 3 classes the last few years, and Alabama obviously for the last 10 years since Saban's been there. Auburn's been more in the 5 to 15 range, but yeah, good enough that they can compete. Yeah. Yes. The only differences I would make between last year's teams and this year's teams is Auburn has had a much better running game last year with Kerryon Johnson, and earlier in the season with Cam Petway. They also had both of those games against Georgia and Alabama at home, where they have to go to Athens this week, and they've got to go to Tuscaloosa to play those 2 games. And then you mentioned the Jalen Hurts versus Tua Tagovailoa comparison, which is no comparison.
Right. And then I think one year Auburn beat Alabama with a defensive back playing quarterback. That the year they ran the kickback, I believe. So I mean, they have a strange way of beating Alabama, man.
Well, that defensive back wouldn't want you calling him a defensive back, but you're completely right. He was recruited and signed as a defensive back at Georgia. Then he transferred to Auburn. We're talking about Nick Marshall. Then he was Auburn's starting quarterback when they went to the national championship game that year in 2013 and beat Alabama. And then his senior season the next year when they started in the top 5 in the season and finished 8-5. Yep, Nick Marshall.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be a hit and ride, because we always had these upsets. We think we know it all, and then all of a sudden something like that happens. And, I mean, it happens a lot. And then, I mean, I don't know how it was, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe, yeah, it had to be 2 or 3 years ago. Georgia Tech gives Georgia issues sometimes with their triple option.
Sure.
And you might be sitting there looking like, "Damn, how in the world did Georgia Tech do that this year?" And it looks like Georgia Tech throwing the ball a little bit more than what it have been. So, I'm going to sit back and enjoy it, and we're going to see what happens. But, I mean, college football, I hate it's going to be gone in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We almost a bowl season. And, but I'm going to enjoy it these next couple of weeks. And I'm even worried about Clemson playing in the cold against Boston College at 8 o'clock at night.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I know they went out there 2 years ago and absolutely destroyed Boston College, but this team is a little bit better, and Clemson hasn't faced a running game and a running back like this yet. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah, this is the best Boston College offense we've seen under Steve Adazio, first and foremost, because of the passing game. Yeah, it's not great, but in comparison to what it's been since he's been there, it's much better with Anthony Brown at quarterback, and this being his 2nd season starting. And they actually have not a great wide receiver core by any stretch, but they've got some capable tight ends like Tommy Sweeney, and they've got Kobe White on the outside and Jeff Smith, and they've got decent wide receiver play. But you mentioned this A.J. Dillon kid. He is the real deal. He is really good, powerful back with quick feet in the hole and can make you miss, but usually chooses to plow you over, but can make you miss as well. He's a really special back. He's a top 5 in the nation back. He's really good. Yeah. So they are loaded on offense in terms of a power running game. They've got a very experienced line, the most experienced line in the ACC. That's really good.
Right.
And so if Anthony Brown has a good game, which is asking a lot, and it's asking a lot of that offensive line to play that well against that defensive front, of course. But they're probably the most capable team, I got to say, offensively and defensively, to deal with Clemson. They might be the second best team in the conference. They might be. It's a close call.
Well, let me ask you this, Mark. I know we say that, but nothing against Purdue, and Purdue got a hell of a wide receiver. But they gave over 37 points to Purdue.
30. Yep.
So I think Clemson got a little bit more offensive talent than I think they gave a whole lot of points to Wake Forest. I know it was on a short week, but I mean, it's gonna be interesting. But I think at the end of the day, I think we all think Clemson's gonna wear them down and beat them. It might not be by like they did Louisville, but I mean, I don't think they're gonna score 60, 70 points like they did on Louisville and
DeAndre.
In Florida State.
Are you okay with winning that game by 19 points? Wink, wink.
I'm okay with winning by 1 point.
Okay. All right.
Win the game.
All right. I'll take a 19-point Clemson win.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've already committed myself to that one. All right, DeAndre, I appreciate the call. You have a great weekend. And
thank you for letting me call in.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon. All righty. Bye-bye. Our man DeAndre, who loves the Clemson Tigers. Buckeye Claire Crawford, having difficulty getting online. Unfortunately, I don't know what the deal is there. I've sent her the link a few times. I'm also going to, don't know whether to shut down this live stream and do that. I also need to get this out to Dan Rubin, who's going to join us from Eagles Unlimited. Looks like I'm going to need more hands and fingers to do all this. Hold the phone and then also send out the link. This is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do we have on the line?
Get this out. Hello?
Yes. Can you turn down the audio in the background because it's on a delay? So
Yeah.
you're going to be a little confused.
All right, sorry.
Hey, no problem. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good, pretty good. My name's Patrick. I go by the handle Irish Medic.
Oh, yeah. How you doing?
I don't know if you see me on it. Pretty good, pretty good. I'm actually calling you from Ireland.
Wow. How are things in Ireland?
Well, I used to live in New Jersey, but I've been over here for maybe about 10 years now. But I still faithfully watch college football. So,
awesome.
I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I figured I'd put your predicting skills to work, and
oh boy,
I was going to give you a scenario.
Okay.
Like, suppose Clemson wins out and is the ACC champ, and Notre Dame wins out, Michigan wins out and is the Big Ten champ, and although it's unlikely, Georgia beats Alabama and gives them their only loss in the SEC championship game.
Sure.
Now, who do you say Georgia beats them by roughly 7 to 14 points?
Okay.
Who do you think goes to the playoff?
Okay, so we've got Georgia, one-loss big SEC champion. We've got I'm doing some things here at the same time. I'm trying to keep track of sending out links to people and keeping track of the scenario at the same time. Basically, you've got everybody winning their conference championships with one loss. You've got Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, right?
Yes.
Michigan, Georgia, Oklahoma with one loss as conference champions.
Exactly.
What happened to Clemson?
Clemson is undefeated, and they won their ACC championship.
Okay.
And Notre Dame wins out also.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so we've got Notre Dame in, we've got Clemson in, so we got 2 spots for 3 teams because Washington State's not going to get consideration. So you pretty much are laying out a scenario in which, well, Georgia, and we've got Georgia with one loss, right? Oh,
Correct, yeah.
they're both. I would say Georgia's in the SEC champion with one loss. That's not even going to be contemplated by the committee. They're in.
Right.
It's going to be a Michigan-Oklahoma decision. So Michigan wants Ohio State to be as strong as possible. They really don't need Northwestern to stumble again, because it's conceivable, it's feasible for Northwestern to lose again and still get to the Big Ten championship game at 7-5. So they certainly don't need that.
Right.
If anything, they would need Iowa might be the best representative from a record standpoint at 9-3. Either Iowa or Wisconsin getting there at 9-3. So that would help out Michigan. You know, I think Oklahoma would most likely be the team left out of that scenario.
Okay. The reason I gave you this was because everybody that I've watched, you know, various different channels, and everybody seems to think that even if Alabama is a tremendous team, but they seem to think that even if Alabama lost, they'd still make the playoffs. You know, and
well, it depends what else is going on. You just can't ask those questions in a vacuum. And I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying in general, we can't look at those questions in a vacuum. So, yeah, under that scenario, you've got Georgia with one loss, and they just beat Alabama, and Alabama sitting there with one loss. I would love to see the scenario, because I would love to see the committee squirm with
yeah, exactly.
You know, and why not?
More than a couple of unhappy people, I think, in the country anyway.
Yeah, because you've got an Alabama team who most people consider, and I would as well, based on the body of work on the field, to be by far the best, and they've been the most dominant team. Not against the best schedule, but the most dominant team. And for them to lose, especially if it was just a really classic game in which you just felt as though these two teams are just playing at another level, like a national championship game from last year, and Georgia just happens to win 30-28 on a last-second field goal, and Bama's sitting there with one loss, but they don't have a conference championship. And I hope that they would honor that. I understand not honoring that, because the comparison was against Ohio State with 2 losses last year. I still didn't agree with it, but I understood it. I would not understand it against teams that only had the one loss and a conference championship. But they can always fall back on it's their purpose and it's their mission to select the 4 best teams. So they don't really need to give much criteria. They can just say, we selected the 4 best teams.
Right. That's true.
That's ultimately what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, they did that last year, I guess, with Alabama not having a conference championship, so I mean.
But again, you bring it into play with comparisons against other one-loss teams. Ohio State and USC had 2 losses. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But also, I've just seen a lot of stuff during the week that people are I know Notre Dame hasn't really been super dominant on different teams, and they even had a very close game to Pitt, but I think even though it was close, I think maybe Clemson and Miami would have been happy a couple of years ago to have that close win instead of losing, and Penn State also losing to Pitt, and just the game versus Northwestern. They were never really behind, and they had the block punt, which was the special teams really need some help. That's one bad aspect of their game, but they had 4 touchdowns, and maybe I think it was just about 5 weeks ago, Michigan was against Northwestern in the same scenario, and they were actually down 17 points. So I don't know, some way Northwestern, they seem to get up for the big games or whatever. I don't know.
Northwestern's tough to figure out, but I give them all sorts of credit, because their athletes are not supposed to be able to compete with the likes of Michigan and Notre Dame, but they do. I think if you look at the seasons in which they're really good, they typically get up for those games, but at the same time, they also have these letdowns where they basically they can't play a C game. They don't have the athletes to play their C game. And you'll see where a couple of years ago they finished at 10-2 in the regular season, but they went to Michigan and lost 30-0. They played Tennessee in the bowl game and lost 42-12 or 42-13. They got annihilated. So they have to have all the fundamentals together and everything clicking to compete with those teams. But I root for those kind of teams like Northwestern. I just think it's fun for them to be able to take sure they produce NFL players. It's not like they're just absolutely nothing, but for the most part, they can't match up in recruiting, and they still find a way to be very competitive.
Well, I think, like the Clemson, the last couple of weeks, Clemson's been blowing people out, and, Alabama's been blowing them out mostly all year. But I think those close games that are, on people's schedules, even if it's Notre Dame or if it's Michigan and Ohio State or whoever it is, if it's like a close game, that makes college football much more attractive to me. It's instead of like anybody can watch a game like 42-7 or 77-10 or whatever, but I mean, like, those really close games is really what kind of gets me fired up about college football. So
yeah, those are the games we're talking about on Saturday night late. We're talking about those dramatic finishes and those wild plays and those coaching decisions that had to be made on 4th and goal and all those sorts of things. That's why we watch sports, for the drama. One of the main reasons why we watch sports. Not to see Clemson beat North Carolina State or Louisville, 77-16. And it's funny to see in the box score, like the Michigan Rutgers game a couple years ago was 78-0. I couldn't wait because I'm a geek. I admit it. I couldn't wait to get to the box score to see what kind of statistics were in that box score of a 78-0 game. And it was just about as ugly as you could imagine. Rutgers had like 14 yards of offense, and it was just incredible, the annihilation. But I don't want to sit there and watch it.
Right. I'm just kind of laughing because I'm in my 50s now, but I was actually a walk-on at Rutgers in the 80s.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah, good for you.
It's just kind of funny. Yeah, we were a little bit better back then, but
you'll have to come back on sometime, and we'll have to recant some of your games. We've got one of our media guests coming on the line right now, but we appreciate the phone call.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the football.
You too.
All right. And with that, we take it to the aforementioned Clemson team that did, in fact, annihilate Louisville 77-16, and that's what they've been doing for the last 3 weeks against the likes of these teams. We've got Dan Rubin on the line from Eagles Unlimited, talking Boston College football as BC hosts Clemson this weekend. Dan, how you doing tonight? Uh-oh, this may be my fault. Dan, I believe this is my fault, and I'm trying to figure out how to get
There we go. Yeah, my I gotta tell you, the excitement level up here. I was saying to a couple people, it's Wednesday. It feels like some days that the week is flying by and that we're ready for Saturday already. And oh my God, I can't believe it's almost here. And then on the other day, I can't believe it's not almost here. Like these are some long days getting ready for Saturday, because the excitement up here is you're just sitting back and you're waiting. This is, I think, the biggest game in probably 10 years. If as a Boston College fan, this is it. This is our Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dan, you know that we sometimes try to play the role of educator here, and because most of College Football Nation, they get locked into those numbers that we put on the left side of the name of the team, and when they see 2 versus nothing or 2 against 22, there's not a whole lot of thought given to, well, this game is really meaningful. Other than, well, the team with the 2 next to their name, they better not lose any games because they got to make the Final Four. But there's something called a conference race and a conference championship and a division race. And that only includes those games that they play within the conference. So we've got some classic cases of that across the country. Pitt right now sitting atop the ACC Coastal Division. Oh, forget the 5-4 record. I know it's ugly, but they had to play the gauntlet of Central Florida, Penn State, and Notre Dame. Northwestern sitting at 5-4 right now. They control the Big Ten Western Division. And similarly, although they have a much better record right now at 7-2, BC, regardless of the way Clemson appears to be dominant right now, this is a head-to-head for the division lead and a possible trip to the ACC championship game.
Yep. BC is the one team in the ACC Atlantic that controls its own destiny, which is, and so does Clemson. I mean, if Clemson wins on Saturday, the race is over and the Tigers are in, regardless of what happens against Duke. But those are the only two teams left, I should say, that control their own destiny. Clemson 6-0 in conference, BC 4-1. If BC wins on Saturday, they've got two conference games left. Clemson only has one, and Clemson would need BC to lose another game in order to make the ACC championship, which is amazing considering that they could finish the season 11-1 and not make the conference championship. They could conceivably even go to the playoff with an 11-1 record and not make the conference championship game. BC, on the other hand, 7-2, 4-1 in league. Syracuse behind them needs some help from BC to beat Clemson, to lose to Duke, and then Syracuse to win out, which would include a head-to-head game against BC on the last Saturday of the season. So this is a huge weekend for ACC, for the ACC, especially the ACC Atlantic. The implications of this game are rife. This is what I mean when I say it's probably the biggest game in 10 years for Boston College football, is because they haven't had a chance this late in the season to put a stamp and get into first place of the division since 2008 when they last made the conference championship game. So this is a huge game, is for that reason, for both teams.
Just had a Clemson caller on the line a few callers ago, and I was trying to let him know that basically this BC offense is not hugely dynamic. It's not one of the first offenses we gravitate to across the country in regards to explosiveness, but this is the best Boston College offense since when? Anthony Brown's playing extremely well. This is the best passing attack with the best weapons that we've seen. And of course, A.J. Dillon is a premier top 3 running back, top 5 running back in the country. The offensive line is extremely experienced. If there's an offensive line in this conference that can deal with that defensive line, it's this one. Those first 3 drives, Dan, against Miami in particular, and I think they, in a sense, kind of closed it down, went into a shell, and kind of protected that 2-score lead most of the rest of the game. But those first 3 drives where they went touchdown, field goal, it was a thing of beauty the way they orchestrated those drives with the various formations and the whole deal. BC, they can look extremely good on offense.
Yeah, and just pulling up some of the stats over here, when you look at some of the numbers don't really, I think, jump off the page as being, wow, flashy numbers. You're still looking at under 2,000 yards passing from the quarterbacks. Brown only has 1,500 yards passing, and A.J. Dillon missed a couple of games with an ankle injury, re-injured his ankle last week against Virginia Tech, and he's only got 900 yards. So you're looking at an offense that beats you through a variety of dynamic type of ways, which is, we're going to control the clock, drag the game, but we're still run tempo. Against certain teams, we're going to run warp speed and try to pound and ground at a faster clip. And that's what happened against Miami and Virginia Tech in the later on in the second half, because the offensive line was able to contain and get the creativity of the offensive formation. So there's a lot of tight ends. It's very different than what fans might be used to in the more modern spread option, a lot of the run and gun, fun and gun type of teams, because they're able to go no huddle, BC, and switch it up by playing a lot of 12 men, a lot of 12 formation, 21 formation, 22, 13 with 3 tight ends and 1 running back. They're going to be a team that doesn't wow you necessarily with the streak up the sidelines, look at this guy run a 4.3 40, but they're going to be the team that you look at the end of the game and say, Well, they had 450 yards of offense, and it was perfectly balanced between the pass and the run. How'd they get here? The quarterback only threw for 175 yards, but they still threw for 250 because they had a wide receiver throw a couple of passes, or they had a running game that ran a little bit of option and read option, and the pull block sprung the one big play. So again, not dynamic in a sense that it's gonna steamroll somebody with wow factor, but they are capable of doing that.
So, Dan, when you look at the Clemson dynamic right here, they are really rolling right now. We know what the talent is there. So even when they were struggling, it seemed to be a matter of time. Although the quarterback situation was up in the air, obviously with Kelly Bryant in place for the first handful of games, and people wanting to know and to see. And we have gotten our dose of whether Trevor Lawrence is ready for the spotlight and ready for the job. And yes, he is. And so now we're seeing the Clemson team that we expected to see, that's dynamic all over the place. And maybe you're not catching them at the best time right now.
Yeah, I was doing an interview with a Clemson radio show yesterday, and they asked me, what worries you? Is it the running game with Travis Etienne, or is it the passing game with Trevor Lawrence? And I just said yes. I think both of it worries me because this is an offense that's clicking on all hails. I don't think anything that they've done the last 4 weeks is by accident, or even this whole season. I think you go back to that NC State game, Lawrence threw for 308 yards. 314 yards against Florida State, and he didn't have to really throw the ball against Louisville all that often because they just steamrolled Louisville with 77 points. So you're catching Clemson rather, at a time when they are clicking, and defensively, you have to wonder if they can stop them, BC. I don't necessarily think you're going to stop Clemson from getting yards. I think the way that you beat them is just to limit possessions, because you cannot stop this offense all game long, and you cannot stop them from getting theirs. And so you have to limit their possessions with your ball control on the offense, drag this game out a little bit more, get your stops, limit Clemson to 3 instead of 7, limit explosive plays, let them get 400 yards of offense, 450 yards of offense, but let them do it between the 20s. Let them bend, let them hold them to field goals, hold them to red zone stops. And then every team, I don't care who you are, makes a mistake at some point during a football game. Everybody does. The question is whether the throw's off the line, whether the running back misses the hole, whether somebody misses a block, or a defensive back falls down, or whatever it is. Connect when that play presents itself. You wait for those opportunities. Clemson will present it. Every football team presents it at some point, and that's when you capitalize. You get the turnover, you get the big stop, or you make the big play.
I'm looking at the game scores and kind of processing what I've seen. I saw every play of the Miami game. I saw a lot of the NC State game, which you got down early, really out of the game, or so we thought. I think there was a block punt mixed in there and some big plays on defense, and the offense got it going and gave North Carolina State a scare at the end there, 28-23. Saw much of the Wake Forest game, that being an ESPN game that was moved up due to the hurricane. Did not see the Purdue game. They would be the one near prolific offense that I could compare to Clemson, maybe not in regards to the star rankings next to the personnel, but this Rondale Moore certainly can play anywhere in college football, and the way David Blau's been playing for the last 6 weeks, he's pretty dynamic. So you've seen something comparable there, and with some of the talent that NC State brings to the table on the outside with Kelvin Harmon and obviously Ryan Finley at the controls. Miami might be that team, but they don't have the guy under center that can make it happen. So those guys running down the field can be wide open. If the guy can't get the ball to him, that's not going to happen. So you've seen parts of what you're going to see on Saturday night at times.
Yeah, and that NC State game is a great case study because BC got down pretty quick. It was only 7-3 at the end of the first quarter, but then in the second quarter, you give up the 14 points, and Finley had been chucking the ball all over the field on you. They finished NC State with over 500 yards of offense, and it was 21-3 at halftime. You come out in the third quarter, you're unable to get the ball moving, and then you give up a 7 or 8 minute drive that doesn't result in anything, but you still gave up a 7 or 8 minute drive at that point. Give up the last score, and then with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, you're down 28-3. I know the exact percentage, by the way, that when you're down 28-3 with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter, you have a 99.6% chance of losing the football game, and that's because I'm a Patriots fan. But at that moment, the way that the BC had come back or had to claw back, you really had to play a perfect game to even make the comeback, and they proved that they could. They started making turnovers. They started forcing NC State into making mistakes. In that fourth quarter, a couple of long drives, preventing it, holding the time of possession battle, and being able to move the ball gets you in position to win the game. Now, you can't have what happened in the first half and have the inconsistency, in particular with that game, because you're unable to make the comeback. I think even if you play a little bit better in the first or second quarter, we're not talking about a 28-23 loss. In terms of the Miami game and what kind of presented there, it was kind of the opposite, which was you come out, warp speed, heavy tempo, put Miami on their heels, a lot of emotion in the stadium, and you build the lead. It was red bandana night at Alumni Stadium, so it was a big deal. Team played with a lot of energy, a lot of heart that night. And then in the second half, you realize, wait a second, we can control the clock, kind of run a little bit slower, not play to protect the football, not necessarily play to sit on a lead, but realize that you could hold the Miami offense within its box, because if Miami had to step out of their game, you had them beat whenever Miami had to make plays that they weren't capable of making. So what does that mean against Clemson? Well, Clemson's going to have a lot better of a quarterback than Miami, and they're probably going to have a lot better of a defense than what NC State played in the second half. So I think you have to be able to take the first half from the Miami game, where you played exceptionally well, and combine it with the second half of the NC State game, where you were still had your foot on the accelerator in order to come back. If you can play that game, and what I mean by that is perfect execution of a perfect game plan, then you'll find yourself in that 13%, which I think ESPN FPI said 88% chance of Clemson victory. You sit in that 12% by perfectly executing the perfect game plan and taking pieces of what worked from those first and second halves.
I'll buy that. I'll buy that. We've had a couple games in that point spread range of where it sits right now, about 19 or 20. Pulled off by a BYU against a Wisconsin, pulled off by an Old Dominion, most famously against a Virginia Tech. Those two come to mind right off the top of my head. And we've had several around the 2-touchdown level, Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida. But maybe the difference here is that Boston College is more capable than the teams that pulled off most of those upsets. But Clemson is at the highest rung of the highest rung, right next to Alabama, in regards to trying to avert disaster. And so it should be very interesting. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you defense. I'm going to ask you about the crowd. So let's go defense first in regards to trying to make this happen. We talked a lot of offense for BC. We talked a lot of Clemson offense. How's the defense playing? I only saw the score from Virginia Tech. I didn't track that game and didn't see it.
The defense has been playing great, and it's been synergetic, which I think that I've used the term synergy with you, Mark, at least. Of how many times have I used that term when I talk about BC? I think I use it at least twice abroad.
This time around.
Yeah, that's one. So I'm good for at least 2 or 3 more. The defensive line has been fantastic. The edge rushers, Zach Allen, starting to prove why I think he's going to be a big factor on Sundays. Even if they move him back to linebacker, or how he projects. Wyatt Ray has played out of his mind at times. Has made a couple of big sacks, and with the two of them crashing around the edges, you fill the middle with 2 strong defensive tackles. Ray Smith does a really good job of playing on the opposite side of the line. And Tanner Carafa has been a pleasant surprise in addition to the defensive line for BC. When you're getting back into the linebackers, I think that I'm not going to call that the worry, but considering the strength of the defensive line and the strength of the secondary, the linebackers become when you're grading out an A versus an A- or an A- to a B+. What's the difference between an 80?
Hopefully we still have Dan with us. Maybe Dan will notice that he's locked up. I believe our transmission is fine. There you go, Dan.
There I go. Okay. There we go. So from a linebacker standpoint, I think when you compare the front seven, the front four to the back four, you're looking at linebackers who are good in coverage. My only fear is against the speed rushers. If they get speed running backs like Etienne, if Etienne gets a hole, can they fill the hole and be able to tackle him? I think a guy like Isaiah McDuffie, who has played very, very well in coverage, he's going to have to develop very quickly his run stuffing ability. Connor Strahan has been the heart and soul of this defense, coming back for his 5th year. But, he also hasn't faced a running back of the caliber of Etienne or anyone else for that matter who runs for Clemson. And then, you're looking at guys that Max Richardson, who, again, plays very physical, but they have to come up with the right stop at the right time because a speed running back through a hole, you don't have a Luke Kuechly or a Mark Herzlich who's going to, sprint and fill that hole when a guy misses an assignment. So they're very good, but my question is, and this is something that I think I've said a number of times, is how they will be against the run. Not if they can stop the run, how they can stop the run, and how within the game plan they can. Back in the secondary has been phenomenal. They've made a couple of changes through the games, but I think anybody who watches the Boston College no-fly zone defense, as they're called, will be incredibly impressed. They're one of the nation's best at interceptions, and these are guys who can stop anybody. Brandon Sebastian was just named the ACC Player of the Week for the secondary, or Rookie of the Week, I think. Lucas Dennis is a force. Tajamir Torres, Will Harris is a physical type safety. This is a complete defense, and even if a linebacker gets out in coverage or has to step up, a safety or a cornerback can cover them. And I don't necessarily know that a complete team defense, you can have a number of first-round picks on your defense that are great individuals. It's how you play together. And from a Boston College standpoint, the system has always worked, and the system has worked this year. So it remains to be seen, though, again, can they do it against Clemson?
Got Dan Rubin on the line from Eagles Unlimited, biggest game of the season this year, certainly, and going back several seasons for Boston College, is they can still win the ACC. Yes, they have one more loss than Clemson, but in the ACC, Clemson's got 0. Well, they got 2 more losses than Clemson. They've got 0, of course, Clemson, and just the 1 loss in conference play against NC State for Clemson, meaning they force the tiebreaker. They win the tiebreaker if they can win this head-to-head matchup in Chestnut Hill as a 20-point underdog. So what is the atmosphere going to be like? Of course, we're not talking 100,000 people. We're not talking about some of the typical settings that we see in college football on a Saturday night at Penn State or somewhere like that. So can that be a factor for this team to ride the wave to an upset?
Well, I think so. The game's already sold out, so 44,500 people will be in Alumni Stadium. Whether or not that's all BC, I know Clemson always travels well, and some people have probably decided to make this their November vacation, so I'm sure there will be Clemson fans. But 44.5 doesn't sound like a lot, especially in comparison to Florida State or even to Clemson. But it's a small stadium. Everybody's on top of each other. It gets very, very loud, very, very fast. And the atmosphere wise, it's going to be insane because the stadium's built up. And again, it's small, it's cramped, it's right in the middle of campus. From the rest of an atmosphere standpoint, Boston College, where it's coming into this game at a very unique time, just in the city of Boston. The Patriots are obviously rolling. That they're always going to have the attention at this point. And a week and a half ago, we were parading down Beacon Street or Boylston Street with the World Series trophy. Boston has reinvented itself time and time again, from a football town to a baseball town to a basketball town to a hockey town. And the general consensus now is that with game day coming to town, and I was just in a barbershop today, in one of the city towns, and I was told specifically, oh yeah, game day's coming here. So it's now a college football town, even if it's just for 1 week. So it's going to be wild up here. The fans are really going to turn out. I think This is a day that everybody has been craving for. This is, you don't play an ESPN ABC 8 p.m. game on a Saturday in November with game day in town unless that game demands that attention. It doesn't just happen in November. So the city has taken notice. The fans have taken notice. The students have taken notice. We get an extra hour of tailgating before the game. The town and the school has been able to extend that by an hour, so you get 4 hours before the game to cook up your brats and get in the stadium. So it's going to be wild. It's going to be something that I think a lot of people are ready for. They've been waiting for, and I'm very much looking forward to see the city of Boston become a college football town for the weekend.
Dan, as much as I was captivated by that entire picture you were painting of the scene and the setting and the vibe, and Boston being a great sports town, the feel of the game leading up to that, I was most captivated, and I latched on to you being there at the barber shop, because I just thought you took that look with you all the time. It never changed. There were no necessary trips to the barber shop.
If you could paint a picture of a barbershop in Boston, in the guys who are sitting in the barbershop in Boston, and I realize that now my accent's coming out too. If you had to paint the picture, the "We Are All Patriots" flag on the side of the wall with the 5-time Super Bowl champions logo, the TV's on, the guy who works for the MBTA sitting in a chair, and they're looking at you saying, "We got college football coming here, kid, this weekend." That is a stereotype come to life, and that was where I was. And those guys have latched on now for college football, and they're ready to get wild this weekend too, which is a very different feel than I think what some people maybe are used to up here.
Yeah, Dan Rubin on the line from Eagles Unlimited. Dan has joined us for a number of years to talk Boston College football and the ACC. So, Dan, I have no issue with whether you are completely incapable of making any kind of prediction on this game. You don't need to make it right here. So I just didn't know if that was a weekly exercise of yours to make predictions on football games, or concerning your beloved Eagles, or you were incapable of trying to make some kind of unbiased selection.
Well, I'm totally incapable of making an unbiased selection, but I will give you the key, and this is going to be my key when I write up the weekly preview on what to watch for this week, and I'll give away the punchline at the end, which is BC to win this game has to drag this game into the fourth quarter. They have to control the clock, drag the time of possession out. They have to drag Clemson into the fourth, like they did last year down at Death Valley. If they can, they have a lot. They can't get into a shootout in this game. You cannot win a shootout against Clemson, let alone, a team that might not have A.J. Dillon on Saturday, given how his health goes during the week. Game time decision. That's all we know. You can win that game if you control the clock, own the time of possession, keep Clemson's offense off the field, and hold them to field goals instead of touchdowns. Do that. And in that fourth quarter, you're going to be looking at a low-scoring tie game, just like last year. The only difference now is, can Boston College finish it, where last year Clemson scored 3 times in the last 5 minutes?
Dan, basically, you are reciting the script that you've given me, I don't know how many countless times, anytime the matchup has been Clemson, or in the past when they were good, Florida State. That's been the formula.
That's the formula. The one thing I love about Steve Addazio, his offense or his game plan, is that he's not afraid to make it simple. And when it's simple, it'll be complex within the simplicity, which is, it's a simple way to win. But you know what? 7 times this year it's worked, and could have been 8, probably could have been 9 at this point, for all we know.
So you bring up Steve Addazio. It's 7-2 right now. It's typically been 7-6. Just the one down year. Is the fan base come around and really embraced him?
I think so. I think this year especially, everybody went into this year, myself included, saying, "Boy, I hope they can get over the hump from 7-5 to 8-4 or 9-3." And certainly they've done enough at this point to be in position for that. But you look over the last few years, and BC really needed to develop a way to beat the Miamis and beat Virginia Techs, because in the past they don't win those games. And you finish 7-5, and you're going to the Sun Bowl maybe, or the Pinstripe Bowl maybe, or you're going back to Shreveport for the Independence Bowl. So I think getting over that hump and getting to that point shows the tangible development rather than me sitting here saying, which is something that I really do believe in too when I say this, that you can be a good 7-5 in this conference. You know, everybody's good enough to finish 9-3. Someone has to finish 7-5 in that scenario. You can be a good team and finish 7-5 in this conference. And you'd like to be 9 wins, but hey, you lost 2 games. They were close. It was maybe a difference of 5 to 15 plays separating you from 9 wins. So if you're Boston College and you're looking at this season, those 10 to 15 plays have started to go your way. You beat Miami. You beat Virginia Tech. That wasn't always happening. So now you're in position to become that 9-win team. And I think now with that tangible proof, even the doubters have started to come around. Tell you what, they win on Saturday, and I don't think he's going to have to pay for a meal for a little while.
Good stuff from Dan Rubin from Eagles Unlimited. In addition to the football coverage, Dan, I want you to bring everybody up to date on what else you have available. Obviously, your play-by-play on ringside as well. I should say rink. Let's make that clear. Side with your beloved Eagles there.
Yeah, well, so not with BC, but I have been lucky enough with a couple of other schools in the area, a couple of Division I hockey programs. Actually, it was hit on was hit up on for so fun story. I did New England Sports Network, Nesson, up here in New England. I had a college hockey game between Brown and Vermont. I've done games for Brown University for a number of years, and also for Bentley University for a number of years. And I got to be the lead-in program for Red Sox pregame live before the clinching World Series game. So we actually got to say on the air, I was doing the game with my oldest brother. My oldest brother actually looked at me and said, "I can't believe we're about to say this, but top of the hour, stay tuned for Red Sox pregame live as the Red Sox try to finish off the Dodgers and win the World Series." Dream come true. I can retire happy now.
Yeah, I tell you, with a complete straight face, understanding broadcasting, how difficult it is to get to certain levels, and being a huge Red Sox fan your entire life. Yes, that must have been a thrill. That is awesome. That is awesome. And my apologies for messing up the team affiliation.
No, it's fine. Maybe someone
on Facebook.
Yeah, maybe someone hears you and then they say, "Hey, wait a second. We should get him to do these games." I'll start the stumping now.
All right, Dan, we appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game. We will. I would tell you, for selfish purposes, just like I did a few minutes ago with somebody who, a Clemson fan that we had on the line, that I just needed Clemson to keep it under 20. But for your sake, I would love to see the monumental upset and the 12% to come through on Saturday night. That would be phenomenal.
Hey, there's no shame in losing to this Clemson team by any number of points. And if you could pull off the upset, you're the giant killer. So I just hope that BC is the team that gets to pull it off. And that's never meant any disrespect to the Clemson fans who are tuned in. Their team is a machine.
They certainly are, and certainly have been for the past few weeks. Dan Rubin from Eagles Unlimited, Clemson and BC at Chestnut Hill on Saturday night. See you, Dan.
Thanks, Mark.
We appreciate it. All right. We also have Miami taking on Georgia Tech. That's also in the ABC ESPN family of networks. ESPN2, 7 o'clock Eastern time at Atlanta as the Yellow Jackets host the Canes. We got Cam Underwood on the line from State of the U. Cam, I could see you partaking there. So we stretch things out just a little bit to hopefully give you a little bit more time to enjoy your dinner tonight. Very nice. No,
it was just the salad. I still have my entree and everything over there, but I wanted to have something as I was coming back from the gym.
All right, very good. Well, we will keep you as long as we can. You let us know when you need to cut out, but obviously we want to talk up what's going on here with Miami football. So before I dive into all the obvious questions, any news this week, whether that came out of Mark Richt's news conference or anything on any front that we need to catch up on?
It's just the search for answers continues for Miami. Obviously, 3-game losing streak, 2-9 in our last 5-7 overall in the last 12, 2-8 or something in the last 10 against Power 5 teams. So like a lot of bad, honestly. Travis Homer is dealing with a calf, hamstring back of the leg kind of injury. So he did not practice today. He took mental reps. He practiced sparingly a couple other days, as reported. So he'll probably be involved. He'll probably play on Saturday, but maybe not be at 100% full strength. So then DJ Dallas will get more carries, and he needs a bounce back game because even though he had a long touchdown last week against Duke, he fumbled 3 times and lost 2 of them, which was pretty bad. And DJ is one of my favorite players on the team, and he does very well. I mean, he had some good plays, but he also had some bad plays. The quarterback quandary continues. N'Kosi Perry and Malik Rozier are rotating first team snaps in practice this week, as was reported, which makes no sense to me because I don't understand why the singular focus and support to keep playing Malik Rozier, whatever you want to call him, number 12. But that's ongoing. So Mark Richt said that he's going to decide, hopefully by, as we record on Wednesday, he said tomorrow. So by Thursday, if you're listening to this later, that he will have decided, Mark Richt, that is, on a quarterback. And the plan is to play 1. So evaluating 2, and the plan, I believe I saw that posted, was to play 1. We'll see, because there have been statements in the past about, if you deserve to play, then we'll find a way to get you on the field or things like that. And, in that game at Boston College, he said that about N'Kosi Perry, and N'Kosi Perry didn't play a single snap. Mark Richt said a similar thing about Jaron Williams this week. So I fully expect Jaron Williams to take 0 snaps this week. Additionally, because Jaron Williams has already played in 1 game, and if he plays this week, then that means he'll have to not play one of the remaining 3 games so he doesn't go over the redshirt threshold. But if you hold him out until the Virginia Tech game and then play him from there through the end of the year, assuming Miami does not get to the ACC championship game, which is a very long shot at this point. But then you have Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, and a bowl game, and then he can play all 3 of those games consecutively to end the year and still retain his red shirt. So, that's an ongoing thing. And everybody sees what's going on. Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator, said what happened on Saturday night was wrong. The search for answers continues. And it's frustrating, just because Miami was in a similar but opposite spot years ago when Al Golden was the coach, in being intractable about changing the defensive scheme and methodology, and that was the side of the ball that was holding us back. And now we get Manny Diaz to come in with this new staff, Mark Richt obviously being the head coach, and he switched from that wannabe Rutgers, Penn State-ish, whatever, and said, look, we're going to be fast, we're going to get up the field, we're going to wreak havoc, we're going to do all these things, we're going to take advantage of these Miami area athletes and not take a guy like an Anthony Chickillo, who was a freshman All-American at 255 pounds, and then you blew him up to 295 or 305 in the course of his career because you wanted him to be, that 3-4 defensive end, maybe slide inside to the nose. He was never built like that, and you're not trying to change people into sizes and things or weights that their bodies aren't naturally built for. So, but then the defense is doing amazingly, and the offense is letting everything down. My SB Nation colleague, Bill Connolly, he wrote about this yesterday on Tuesday. And I wrote something different, but also evaluating the Miami Hurricanes program. And Bill Connolly called it bowdening, which is so it was a phenomenal read. He talks about, bringing in your son, and it was Jeff Bowden to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. And the offense was atrocious when he was there. And I loved it because, I'm Miami, hello, like all day. But it was terrible. And he, obviously, because you have that nepotism, you have that familial connection, you're going to overlook the shortcomings that you would not accept from a staff member who was not related to you. And Richt is doing that in leaving himself as the offensive coordinator and his son at quarterbacks coach. And you try to look for the bright side of things sometimes, but I believe that I was wrong about John Richt. He just needs to go. I couldn't believe when I read Bill Connolly's piece, we hired John Richt when he was 25 with no experience. That just blew my mind. I knew that it was a move of nepotism to, okay, I'm the head coach, so I can hire my son and whatever. But Yeah, so Bill Connolly wrote about Bowdening and how that's a thing that Mark Richt is emulating that obviously is poor. And then I wrote, 3 keys to rebuilding Miami or to turn things around. And, the first one was, you change an offensive philosophy into embracing more of a spread by alignment and, scheme and spacing and, tempo as well. And then 2, there have to be staff changes. And I already told you about 2. Mark Richt cannot call offensive plays. Manny Navarro of The Athletic, he wrote the same thing. He said he cannot be the play caller anymore. And John Rick needs to go because usually your play caller or your offensive coordinator is going to be the quarterback's coach. So that means we need a slot for that. And there's some other things that I wrote as well. And then the final key of those 3 was recruiting, which, oh boy, that's dicey interaction right now. But yeah, I mean, it's just, and I know that I kind of been rambling for a bit here, but that's kind of just where we are. It's just everywhere that you look, there's a question without an answer. And for a team that was favored coming into the year in every single game, including the LSU game, and I know it was only like 1.5 points, but still, you're favored in every game until this week because Miami has now proven themselves to be in such an atrocious state that the Canes are an underdog at Georgia Tech this week. For the first time all season, but you have all this talent and you have these expectations again for a season that Miami's been building to for 3 or 4 years. And I mean, we're 60 minutes away from Miami being a 5-5 ball team. And that's pretty bad.
Yeah, it is really bad considering the state of the division and the expectations for this team, considering the talent and the recruiting rankings and what happened last year, albeit 3 losses at the end, but that was kind of discarded as being not necessarily an aberration, but that this team would own that division. And I was included in those people that felt as though that was a foregone conclusion. All sorts of people chiming in here. When you bring up Mark Richt and what's been said about all these issues, but the quarterback situation being the primary one and the quarterback's coach, I would love doing what I attempt to do here to be able to watch the 25 to 35 relevant or best teams news conferences each week, but I just can't do it. What is the nature of these news conferences in regards to, does he really get pressed about these issues? And does he give the pat answer, or does he give any type of relevant or meaningful information?
I mean, he gets pressed as far as the people who are there can press. I mean, you can't really go off the deep end, and like, hey, jerk or whatever, like, you're gonna answer me. I mean, you can't like strong arm him or anything. Even less so because Miami is a private school, so like, the ability to be withholding of information is the structure is there differently at Miami than at a Georgia or Texas or anywhere else that's a public university. So there's that. So the question is asked, or the questions are asked repeatedly, questions that need answers, like, okay, well, Miami's scored less points every single week the last 3 weeks, 14, 13, and 12. You had Malik Rozier come out earlier in the year and said 40 points a game is the standard. I don't care who you're playing. Miami has 39 points in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? I mean, like, these things are asked, and you ask about the quarterbacks, what was there ever, at the Boston College game, what was the methodology? Was there a thought of going to N'Kosi Perry? No, there wasn't. Look, you've talked about every week this year about going to or wanting to go back, or, Malik Rozier, but then that game, there was never a thought. You know what I mean? Like, these things are asked. And, Mark Richt knows that he has the power in this situation, especially, again, with Miami being a private school. So he answers, but sometimes you do get canned answers. A lot of times you will get coach speak, and then, follow-up questions will be asked. And, the level of clarity is, maybe murky at best. So he's not really getting into Mark Richt, that is. He doesn't really talk about things in practice. He just says, well, we see things in practice that you don't see. Like what? Well, it's just in practice. Like what? Like, is Malik Rozier, I mean, I know you chart every throw. Is he 70% in practice? And if he is, so then what's the problem moving to games? You know what I mean? If, like, are you seeing, like, is N'Kosi Perry fumbling the ball all the time? Is Jaron Williams hitting only 22%? Or he, when you do red zone drills, the offense only scores on 1 out of 3%? Like, I want to know what these things are, and everybody wants to know what these things are. But it's just one of those. It basically boils down to, if you were, I mean, well, everybody was, when you're a child and you ask a question and eventually it gets to the point of, "'cause I said so." That's where Mark Richt is now. Like, we have valid questions. I mean, we're not kids. Like, I mean, you have, people who are adults, like, who have been in and around sports for a long time, whether it's playing, whether it's covering, whether, whatever. But you have learned people, intelligent people asking intelligent questions. And it gets to the point where, like, he's backed into a corner. So, like, because I said so. So, I mean, are the questions asked? Yes. Are answers given? Yes. Is it anywhere near the level of clarity that we would want? No. And I don't expect, like, full clarity. I'm not expecting him to come out and give us the whole chapter and verse and, okay, well, this is everything that's going on in practice and everything behind the scenes and whatnot. And I mean, like, no, that would be asinine. And I know that, Mark Richt goes on the radio every Monday morning, and Joe Rose, the local host down here, asked him something schematic, to get towards that. So, like, what are the route combinations that you can do to update or things like that? And Mark Richt simply said, I'm not going to do that on the radio. I'm not going to get into X's and O's, which is similar to a couple of years ago, if you remember, in the NBA Finals. It was leaked that Andre Iguodala was going to start for the Golden State Warriors. And Steve Kerr was asked point blank about that before the game. And he just said, "We're the Warriors. We're going to do what we do. We have our starters, and that's it." He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. But he was like, what would I gain from 4 hours before the game giving away this trump card that we had, like, by going with the death lineup to start? Like, why would I tell my opponent the scheme that we're trying to use to beat them? And I get that part of it. But there is much to be desired about the methodology. And again, I've been saying this for a long time. I have no earthly idea why Mark Richt supports Malik Rozier singularly the way he does more than any other player on the roster. It makes no sense to me, given the results that we've seen and the performances that we've seen. It just makes no sense. And that's a question that has been asked and has not been answered. And that's the question out of anything else. That's the question I want an answer to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you take away the Nkosi Perry games, which total maybe 2.5 or so, we're working on about 8 or 9 awful games for the most part, from Rozier going back to the end of last season.
Not even the end of last season, because even again, and I said this with you, even when Miami was winning, there was much to be desired. And again, I can go back over these 4 for 16 for 34 yards in an interception in the first half at Florida State. That whole Georgia Tech game, that was a loss, the Pittsburgh game. But even before that, North Carolina was not good. Syracuse first half was not good. Virginia first half, you hit a couple throws, okay. But I mean, like, there were things that Toledo first half, you know what I mean? Like, there were times last year, even when Miami was winning, and by hook or by crook, by smoke and mirrors, or, duct tape, which, has a light side and dark side and will, put the world together. That was how Miami won those games. You have defense. It was opportunistic. It, impactful by getting turnovers. You get a short field. You do all these kind of things. But, I kept writing it in our grades and our recap, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I was like, I get that there's a win, and I like winning, and I hate losing. But we cannot ignore what's going on at the quarterback position. And people called me a hater. But go back and look at those. Go back and look at the game-by-game numbers. CFBstats.com. They don't pay me. I just use the site a lot for statistics. Go back, click on passing, click on 2017, click on Malik Rozier, and on the side, click on game log. And you go back and look at those numbers game by game. And I'm telling you, it's not even just this year. It extends back. And that's where the nature of my and a lot of people's frustration comes from, because we have seen who he is, Malik Rozier. And again, I wrote this summer already. To take a step forward, Miami has to move on from Malik Rozier. Miami did not move on from Malik Rozier and hoped against hope, absent any kind of development or proof or foundation, that he was going to be a different player than we had seen. Malik Rozier is a different player than we had seen, in a worse way. And the win and loss record reflects that, because Miami got by and won games that rightfully they should not have last year. And this year, we got to pay that bill.
Yeah, and then those are stats, and they typically give you most of the picture. And then, as we talked about last season, you could give me the song and verse, the chapter and verse of the various throws. The one that comes to mind, and I'm not talking about one throw, I'm talking about repeated, the slant to Berrios. This would happen about 2 to 3 times a game, where Braxton Berrios would need to go down to a hip, or slide and catch it behind him, and where he would have been traveling for 30 or 35 yards with the ball after the catch, with a decent quarterback throwing it on time.
Right. I mean, hey, it's a completion. It got there. And I mean, that's a win because, Malik was only completing 51 or 54% of his passes, or it was 54% for the year and 41% in the 3 losses. So, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. But, like I said, Miami won games that reasonably, especially with the performance from the quarterback position, which, look, quarterback, you get the praise and you get the bad as well. If teams do well, quarterbacks get that praise, but if they do, bad, they get the blame. And yeah, it was just, and I would bet good money that Mark Richt is going to start Malik Rozier on Saturday too.
Well, Navy Thomas 8 says Cam is one of the only ones that tells the truth about Miami football. But
appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got some comments about recruiting. So in a nutshell, I think it was Carl. It was several comments ago, hundreds of comments ago, that Carl said you may lose Bogle. He must be a big recruit, looking at Bama, and then just kind of asked in general about the recruiting picture, whether what's going on now seems to be affecting what could happen in the offseason with the next signing class or two.
Yeah, Chris Bogle is a 4-star recruit. He's the one who goes to school near to where I live at Cardinal Gibbons, 6'4", 207 pounds, missed some time with a knee injury, but he came back and is playing with this team now as Florida high school football moves into the playoffs this week. Looked like he was flirting between Miami and Tennessee for a while, canceled a Tennessee visit and made multiple visits to Miami back to back to back. And, seemed as though he was trending towards Coral Gables. But now Alabama might be getting back involved. And that's after they went to St. Thomas Aquinas and got Braylon Ingraham, who by all reports had been telling Miami he was going to be coming and committing for about 3 months, and took one visit to Tuscaloosa and decided to change his mind. Alabama is always out there as a team that, if they go after a guy that you're after, it can be tough for you. I wrote a piece about Miami versus Alabama on the recruiting trail a couple of years ago, and the numbers were closer than you would think. But, and I put this in the piece, this is just the players that Miami was actually contending for. There's a whole class of player that Alabama got that Miami wasn't even in the conversation about. So, I'm not saying that, it was just these couple. Like, it was just these couple that Miami was involved with, but then Alabama was just cherry picking across the country as well on top of that. I have to update those numbers because it's really, really, really tilting in Alabama's favor, understandably so. So there's that. Talking in general about the state of the recruiting class right now, yes, what is going on is absolutely affecting this class. You have 2 decommitments recently. Marcus Crowley, who has been just tearing it up for Trinity Christian Academy from Jacksonville, had back-to-back games of, 266 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then 293 and 2 the next week. Against very good competition. So you're not talking about, Little Sisters of the Poor or anything. Like, he was playing in division, in conference, very good teams, and put up over 500 yards and like 5 or 6 touchdowns in 2 weeks. Urban Meyer decided, hey, we need a running back in this class, and he offered him a scholarship. And within the span of like 23 days, Marcus Crowley had visited and flipped his commitment from Miami to Ohio State. So there's that. And I've been saying for a while, and I've written it on the site, that Marcus Crowley needs to be a 4-star, and he was very underrated as a 3-star. I believe that bump in the rankings was going to come anyway, but I'm fully invested in the fact that it will now. And then the next day or 2 days later, Cornelius Nunn, who had just flipped from Syracuse to Miami, decided to decommit, as well. So those are 2 decommitments within the last week as I'm recording this or speaking to you now. And yeah, all that momentum that Miami had after beating Florida State, even if, whatever, it was a bad team that Miami came back to beat by 1 point. There was all that momentum. You're talking about Jaden Hazelwood, the 5-star wide receiver. You're talking about Evan Neal, 5-star offensive tackle. You're talking about Bogle. You're talking about Ingraham, who was there, and by all accounts, gave a silent commitment to Miami at that time. Like, oh yeah, I'm just going to wait till my mom's birthday on October 23rd before I, announce her everything. But I'm coming. All of that goodwill, momentum, swag, juice, whatever you want to call it, that's all gone. Well, I will say Miami did get a JUCO punter to commit, who's 6'4", 245, native Australian. Oh, no, he's jacked, and he's yadded. I mean, tatted all on the neck through. I mean, like, he pretty much below his jawline in his upper body is all tattoos. Like, and he's 6'4", 245. Like, he's a big dude. So there's that. I mean, so you get a JUCO punter from City College of San Francisco, which is awesome because Miami actually needs it, and he's going to be a scholarship player as well. This punter, Lewis Headley, I believe his name is. So that's going to be hopefully an upgrade moving forward. But yeah, man, it's rough, and I tweeted it out the other day. I said it's tough times on the trail right now, and I know that the third step of the rebuilding process is to improve talent acquisition, i.e., recruiting. But I mean, it's tough, man. Miami has the 22nd ranked class in this recruiting class right now. And I mean, that's fine if you're Middle Tennessee State. It's not good enough if you're Miami. You know what I mean?
That's a bit of a stretch.
I mean, it's not. I mean, well, I mean that
if you're Virginia Tech,
22nd if you're Virginia Tech, that's a good number. That's fine. Okay, cool.
That's about where they typically are.
Right. Yeah. And hey, if you're Virginia Tech, that'll work. But at Miami, it won't, and then you got guys like RJ McIntosh's little brother, Kenny McIntosh, who's a 4-star running back. And he's looking everywhere but Miami, even though, Miami's been on him for 2 years. He's 6'1", 210 or 6'2", 210 as a running back. So he's taken an official visit to Georgia this weekend, who had just lost a 5-star. And other teams are after him as well, Auburn, Oklahoma, and everything. So, Miami's been playing up the, hey, your brother went here, even though the other brother went to Notre Dame, but he left from Notre Dame. So, yeah, no, but your brother went here. You're from here. We should work this out. And he was like, yeah, we'll see what happens. And then now he's looking elsewhere. And then you have Mark Anthony Richards, who's Amon Richards' little brother. I'm sorry, I have to turn on this AC really quickly because it just got really hot in my house. Click, click. Thank you very much. And yeah, I have a Nest, so I can do it from my phone. Anyway,
we are not having that issue here in Connecticut. We were not.
Yeah, I know, right? But Mark Anthony Richards, who Miami liked better at defensive back to start with, and I personally I love Mark Anthony Richards at linebacker or safety. He said he wants to play offense like his brother, or like what he wants to do. So Miami's recruiting him for running back, but you figure, okay, cool, like we're recruiting you hard. Obviously, your brother was a star player. This is before Amon Richards' unfortunate career-ending injury. And so you're doing all that, saying, cool, like maybe if your brother stays, you can play with your brother. Like, you see all this stuff. You're at these games, obviously for recruiting purposes, but also watching your family member, blah, blah, blah. And you would think, okay, cool. Either McIntosh, whose brother starred here, or Richards, whose brother starred here, one of those guys would at least have been all in. And with Marcus Crowley already committed at the time, you have 2 running backs now. So you have probably one of the most underrated running backs in America from Jacksonville, and then the brother of a former star player locally. And neither one of those guys was really receptive to that. I mean, things might change and one of those guys might commit, but you figure, why aren't they committed already? And then like a Bogle, like an Ingraham, there's a lot of guys who's you like Miami and you're from Miami, you talk about it, but where's the action? Where's the movement? And with poor performance, it's tough to then text these kids or DM them or send them graphics and things and say, hey, it's awesome. We're awesome. You should come here. It's going to take an Alabama. What year was that? The legendary recruiting class, 2007, 8. One of those.
The Julio Jones.
Yeah, the one that was the foundation for Alabama as we know it now.
Well, the 09 team won the national championship.
I think it was that 2008 or
yeah, they won in 11 and 12. Right. Yeah,
but one of those years after Nick Saban had gotten there, he was just basically look, everybody come here. We're gonna ball. We're gonna win. And everybody went there and they did it. And that started what we are seeing now. It's going to take out of thin air something like that for Miami to really get to where the roster needs to be. And I'm talking depth on offensive line, because there are guys who are unplayable, guys who are probably going to be unplayable. There's guys on defensive line who are still on scholarship from years ago who have not played a snap. I mean, like, you know, there's a lot to be done, especially with the big dudes up front on both sides of the ball. But, like, you know, eventually you're going to lose guys at skill positions as well. You know, so like, yeah, Miami does have one of the most diverse wide receiver rooms in America. You've already lost Amon Richards to a career-ending injury. And I mean, obviously, he was the number one alpha dog in that room. But okay, cool. So you have Jeff Thomas only for another year, probably, especially with a quarterback situation that's nebulous. I mean, this guy was averaging 25, 27 yards a catch earlier in the year. Jeff Thomas is averaging 18 yards a catch because the last few games he's caught like one bubble screen for 5, or those little touch passes last week trying to get the edge on a jet sweep kind of motion in a monsoon where he doesn't really even have the ability to stick a foot in the ground and get upfield. So, okay, that touch pass is complete for 2 yards. You know what I mean? Like, or you know, like at the Boston College game when he was wide open up the sideline, but you miss him, you know, and that would have been 70, you know, things like that. So you can't count on Jeff Thomas for 4 years, you know, okay, cool. So then what? Now you really need 2 guys in this class because of Richard's career-ending injury, but now Hazelwood might not come. You know, Evan Neal has picked up a bunch of predictions that he's going to commit to Bama or recommit to Alabama. You know, you have all these other guys looking these other places. You might even have some current commits who are looking other places. There's not a lot of good on the recruiting horizon right now. And it's going to take a real sell job to turn that around. But nothing that you say matters unless, and you know, again, I wrote this feature over the summer called The Recruiting Rules. It's still pinned up on the website. Please go read it. It was 9 rules on how to recruit well. The 9th rule is win, which is giving tangible proof of concept, because I can talk about it all I want, but if Miami goes out and has these kind of performances, this is what's going to happen. This is why when Al Golden was here, the future classes were ranked number 1 for 3 and 4, you know, succeeding years. But when it got to be that year's recruiting class, 2013, 2014, 2015, those numbers tanked. Why? Because Miami was bad. Miami lost games. So you can say everything you want, but if you cannot prove that concept, if you cannot deliver tangible success, then it's a house of cards. You have no foundation. You've built a house in quicksand. And that's exactly where Miami is right now, is sinking in quicksand with nothing good going on. So, I mean, I don't know who it's going to be. And I know people want to appeal to the better nature of kids and say, oh, well, you're a fan and everything. Yeah, you can be a fan of somewhere, but then also go somewhere else because it's a better situation for yourself. And Miami is going back to that Al Golden era type thing quickly, where you're going to force kids to do that. You know, it's like, I want to be at Miami. I want to do that. I can give you names of kids that I've covered, that I've spoken to for years, and said, I wanted to go to Miami, but my mom said no, or it was a better situation here and I could do X, Y, Z at whatever position they played. It is, and everybody watching probably has heard this, or, oh, I have a cousin, or my friend went to this school with this player and they did, and and Patrick Johnson, Peterson now, and you can go back and look at that. This is where Miami's going. We're guys who even want to be here, but they don't want to come and lose. They don't want that. But you're going to need guys to, in spite of the win-loss record, to stay. But you can't just have a Duke Johnson do that. You can't just have, you know, Jaquan Johnson do that. You can't just have 1 or 2 guys. You need a full roster. So you're going to have to need that. And I wish I knew and I got to look up the year. But whatever year that Alabama class was, where they just said, look, boom. Okay, so that 2008 recruiting class. I was right the first time. Go me. But Miami's going to need that. And I don't know if there is a ringleader, an ambassador in this class to make that happen. I don't know what coach has that swag like that. And I mean, people hear what Mark Richt is saying. So I don't think that he has the cachet where he can say that either. But it's going to, out of thin air, you're going to need to have that happen, which is going to be pretty miraculous. Because, yeah, like I said, you're not giving kids a reason to stay. And, I mean, I said it when Al Golden was the coach. They're looking for a reason. Not even like all the reasons, not all the bells and whistles, anything. But if you give them 0, if they ask or are inquiring or watching and say, show me anything that would make me stay here, and you showed them nothing, then I mean, look, 0 is less than 1. You didn't even give them the one thing. Oh, it's by where you stay at. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, discounting that. Show me something in the program tangibly. And that's the reality of where Miami is going. So now let's go back to this season. What happens if Miami does not win out? So you're talking about there's already 4 losses. So you're talking about a 7-5 season at best if they go 2-1 through these last, or 3-1 through these last 3. 2-1 in the last 3. So you're talking 7-5, 6-6, or a losing record. You know what I mean? I mean, if Miami wins out, yeah, okay, cool. Then you're 8-4 and whatever. But if you don't win out, so now what am I going to do? I'm going to go into Tyreek Stevenson. I'm going to go to his house and say, okay, cool. We're a 7-5 team. We need superstars, and you're going to be that superstar. And he's going to look around and say, yeah, I'm going to be that one superstar. I'm going to be like Jaquan Johnson, and I might win 10 games one time in my career, get some preseason recognition, maybe a second-team All-American thing, and be a mid-round draft pick. Or I can go to Alabama or Georgia and. It just – there's a lot of bad, and things need to happen. And I've said it for years. There needed to be somebody against Florida State to make a play to turn the tide. There has to be somebody to make plays this year to turn that tide of the season, and that can hopefully feed recruiting, because right now, like I said, it does not look good.
Yeah, to make plays to override the poor decision made at the quarterback position. So in spite of bad quarterback play, in spite of maybe Malik goes out on Saturday and goes, 13 for 27 for $162 and throws 2 picks, but you get a pick 6 and you get this, you strip sack and Travis Homer and DJ Dallas each run for $125. So you put them away by 14 or 17 points and you overcome all of that. And while you were saying that, not to restate it because you said it so much better than I did, but I was thinking as you started into that, not only is Miami seemingly, and you track the guys and what they're thinking and what they're posting, losing the guy that says, I don't have any allegiances. I just want to go to the best situation for me, and I want to be a star, and I want to play on the big stage. So whether that's Miami, Alabama, Notre Dame, wherever it is, I'm going, and just show me that I can be a star, and we're going to win big. Then that's one thing to lose those guys. It's another thing, like you very eloquently explained, to lose that guy that's like, I want to be in Miami. That's where I want to play for this program. I want to play for the legacy of all these championships. I want to just give me something, but it's no, I guess I'll go to Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, wherever.
I mean, you look at all these guys recently, and that'll happen. I mean, and you're going to get some of those guys back. I mean, Trajan Bandy wanted to be at Miami. I talked about it before. He has Sean Taylor's rainbow visor. He has the orange flare visor and the game-worn Fiesta Bowl jersey. He wanted to be at Miami. He was committed to Oklahoma. You go back, you circle around on him and everything, and he comes. But, he's 2 inches too small and 30 pounds too light, to be like a real superstar player. Like, Bandy's really good, and I love him on my team, and he plays bigger than his size, and he wants to be here and everything, but you're not going to get everybody back. You try to circle back around on some of those guys. Sky Moore, who went to South Carolina, linebacker. Miami tried to offer him on signing day, 10 minutes before his signing day ceremony at American Heritage, because Jermaine Grace from Miramar committed at his announcement, and Miami was after Matthew Thomas, 5-star linebacker. He goes to Florida State. And then immediately afterwards on the radio or in interviews right there at Booker T. Washington said, oh, yeah, my number 2 team was Southern California. So you're like, wait, whoa. This kid from the inner city right here goes Florida State, USC, and then Miami. So they're like, oh, we need 2 linebackers in this class. We were hoping it was going to be Thomas and Grace. So now they circle back and they start calling all these people around to try to say, hey, we want Sky Moore, even though he never visited. We never offered him a scholarship and things like that. So even that, and he wanted to be at Miami. He was campaigning for an offer for a long time before this. In his junior year and then the beginning of his senior year. And then he finally came to terms with Miami was not going to be an option for him. And he went somewhere else. And Miami tried to circle back around late, and that was not able to happen. So, yeah, I mean, I don't even know what it's going to be. What the pitch is going to be. If you think back to the NCAA football games, is it going to be playing time? Because a lot of places, if you're good enough, you're going to play. Is it proximity to home? Sometimes yes. But again, the ACC network goes online next year. So even if you go somewhere else in the ACC, you'll be able to be seen. SEC already has a network. So even if you're going to Kentucky, you can, those games are going to be around. If you go somewhere else on a national level, a Michigan, Notre Dame, Southern Cal, whatever, that's a national enough level where those games can be seen or found on their local regional networks. So that, hey, play at home in front of your family thing is a thing. But, if I go to Georgia and I'm 45 minutes away from Atlanta, which is an hour and a half flight from Miami, is that really far? You know what I mean? Is it going to be scheme fit on defense? Probably. On offense? Probably not. Is it going to be coaching at a position? At some positions, yes. At other positions, no. So there is no panacea. Obviously, there's a lot of varying factors, but it's going to be a real test of this staff's ability to recruit, to see what they do moving forward, honestly.
Yeah, we're in a day and age. I'm sitting here in Connecticut, and you bring up, not even at that level of USC and Notre Dame, you bring up a mid-tier team in any of the major conferences, and I can sit here and watch 8 or 9 of their 12 games easily.
Mm-hmm. So you got MACtion on right now. I was just checking it's on halftime, but you got teams from the MAC that are on a Tuesday, Wednesday night, Thursday night. Yeah, that whole, my family will never see me play thing. Like when you or I were kids and ESPN had 2 games or 3 games a week. And maybe, I grew up watching Miami, Florida State, because that was the one game a year I could see Miami. You know what I mean? That was it. Growing up in Detroit, that was it. You didn't really have these additional options. The world's gotten smaller with, the internet and things like that. So yeah, those things matter. Do you want your family and there and everything? Of course. Every basketball game I played growing up, I always looked into the stands on my second left-hand layup of layup lines because I knew where my mom sat. She didn't have to say anything. I didn't wave to her or anything, but I always looked and I always knew. And yeah, it felt great that my mom was there. So if you're able to have that, sure. But absent being able to have that, ma, grandma, auntie, TT, man, everybody on the block, you can turn on CBS 3 times a month or 3 times a year and I'll still be there. And the SEC network and whatever else. So, you're appealing to that and you're still bridging that gap, and nobody's from Alabama. You know what I mean? All these guys are coming from down here. Nobody has people there, but, they continue to go there. So, yeah, there's just a lot of questions. It is the end point of the story. So, yeah, there are some answers, but in terms of recruiting, Miami, there really are not many answers at all right now, and we'll see what happens moving forward. But something does have to change, and somebody has to make a play, or some coach has to recruit a superstar, and they're going to say, look, I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to get these other guys to really get Miami, especially the offense, back on track.
So as you're watching Miami and you've already seen them play most of the teams in the division, you still have Virginia Tech, Pitt, and of course the game against Georgia Tech this week. I know the focus is on why are we losing to these teams and playing down to their level. But on the flip side, has there been anybody that's impressed you more than the other teams that you think is the best team this season, not the most talented, but the best team in the Coastal this season in this division?
Out of the teams in the Coastal that I've seen, I would have to say Virginia probably, just because they're not explosive, really. They do have Olamide Zaccheaus. The quarterback is, he's fine, but they know who they are. They play within themselves. Their defense is actually pretty decent. Their defensive backfield is pretty good. And they put themselves in positions to be successful. So you're not playing behind the sticks. You're not trying to do things that guys can't do. it's a lot like the Patriots in that the Patriots don't have many do-it-all superstars, like that can do everything at their position level. But what they can do is these 2 or 3 things at an elite level. So I'm going to have you do those 2 or 3 things and not ask you to do those other things. Because why? I have this other player to do those things or those engagements on the football field in an area where you lack. I'll have somebody else do that, but you do these 2 or 3 things. And Virginia football this year seems a lot like that. We're not going to ask everybody to do everything because we don't have a do-it-all, dynamic player. But we can get you to do these 2 or 3, maybe 4 things really well. And hopefully, with the defense being strong and the offense being, run-based and timely in the passing game, and also including a QB run game element that Virginia really has not had. And that can be a changing factor for things because, again, if you're playing man-to-man defense, there's nobody really usually accounting for the quarterback. And even if there are, if you're running from shotgun, now you have an extra blocker, so you're outnumbering the people or, the defense at the point of attack. And Virginia seems to be doing that. So, Georgia Tech is playing better right now. Virginia Tech has been just up and down because especially they're so young across the board now, and their quarterback is injured, and, and their defense is like mostly freshmen and things like that. But yeah, if I were to say of all of the other teams in the Coastal Division, not named Miami, who the best one would be this year, I'm going to have to go with Virginia.
I keep repeating this to myself because it just strikes me as funny. We're in the second weekend of November. Of course, college football, the regular season is over by the end of the month. We're almost there. There's still 3 games for them to get taken out of the way. But as of right now, the Pitt Panthers control the division at 4-1. That's astounding to me.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy, especially seeing how they started in the non-conference. But credit to them. They're another team who's not going to try to do everything. They're going to try to do a couple things. So lock you down on defense and then ground and pound, which, if you're watching me talk, then you probably saw some of that Miami-Pittsburgh game last year. And, I mean, if you remember back, that's exactly what they did. They played press man. They're going to, just run blitz all the time. They're going to make Malik Rozier try to throw and then just kind of play action and run you to death on the offensive side of things. So, that is the formula for them. And they've been doing it very well in the division or in the conference. So yeah, Pittsburgh does control their destiny, but I would have to, at this point, take Virginia. But it's not like it's Alabama or Clemson and then everybody else kind of gap. Pittsburgh is in that conversation as well.
And that's why I asked the question, because it's not obvious at all to anybody. No. It's just a mess.
I mean, it should be Miami, but obviously we're a tire fire right now, so no.
Cam Underwood, State of the U. So I say this all the time. Get yourself to State of the U for Miami sports coverage. Of course, college basketball started this week, and the Canes are back in action on the hardwood as well. Miami looking to get to a bowl game, of course, and still with a slim chance of a shot at getting back to the ACC championship game with dates against Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and Pitt to conclude the season. Cam Underwood, State of the U. Cam, it's always a great time. We appreciate you stopping by, even in what has become a lost season for your boys.
Yeah, it and this is why I enjoyed last year so much, because I'd been through the dark times, and you never know when those are going to come back. And I said that then, but I didn't expect them to be back around so soon. But I bleed orange and green. Hail alma mater, dear. We're going to keep doing that and fight the good fight. But I want the results to be a little bit different on the field. So we'll see if that happens or that starts this weekend.
And you had every reason to believe that. You'd
absolutely,
despite all the critics, had a track record of winning 10 games a year. You won a bowl game the previous year. You went 10-3. You went to the ACC championship game. You had the recruiting rankings that were going up the trajectory. Yep. It was all, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like I said, favored in every game, the most talented team in the division. The only 2 teams that we played this year that had anywhere near or above our talent were LSU and Florida State. There was no reason for this, but absent a career-ending injury from a superstar wide receiver, and regression the likes of which we have not seen in a long time at the quarterback position. So whatever.
When you saw the rain gushing down before kickoff, now I don't know where you were at the stadium.
No, I was at home.
Okay. Did you think, uh-oh, this is not what we need. We need the fast track, and here we go. We get something else going against us here.
I actually thought that was going to be a benefit because take the ball out of Malik Rozier's hands. Hand it off. Figure out a way to block, run outside zone, inside zone, one cut and go. I don't need, because neither running back now is a Barry Sanders. You're not going to dance in the hole and spin and make something happen. You're not going to be that Reggie Bush, Christian McCaffrey. He didn't even really do that much. He's not going to dance or anything. Those guys are one cut and gone. And I thought that was the best thing ever. Like, we have the physical advantage over Duke, even with, not necessarily the greatest offensive line, but I thought that was a beautiful thing. I said, look, just hand the ball off and let's lean on them, or not even necessarily lean on them, but try to figure out a way in the running game. And they couldn't stop Georgia Tech the week before. Manny Navarro kept tweeting it out. He said they gave up 9 million yards and 500 points the previous week. I don't remember what the actual numbers were, but it's like 448 yards rushing and 54 points or something like that. So I said, yeah, run that ball. And we have dynamic running backs, so that'll be fine. I was very happy about that. And then N'Kosi Perry comes in, and then you have 2 drives where he starts on the 8-yard line and 2-yard line respectively, and then you pull him back out, and go right back to Malik Rozier a week after having said that there was not a thought in your mind ever about going back to N'Kosi Perry. And it just, but anyway, relative to the rain, I thought it was a good thing. I thought it was going to be a positive thing, and it was for that time. And then the rain stopped, and then we decided that we were going to stop running. And, well, shut out in the second half for a second consecutive week.
And for the neutral football fan, it's just fun to watch guys slide 14 yards. And because you don't see that, you see that once every 5 years to that degree. It was just everywhere.
Oh, it was cats and dogs. And, it was good to see that. And those were, I played baseball as well growing up. And I was fast. So I didn't take infield during those practices or anything. So we did sliding practice in the outfield, and I was fast enough where I had first move. So I didn't have to wait to see where the pitcher was going to go. As soon as the coach did whatever, I would just run, and it was slip and slide out there in the outfield or in my grass. But it was that same kind of condition on Saturday. So it was good. And the defense, obviously did not play well on that first play because over pursuit and lost to contain and let Duke go 75 yards on a cutback run. But after that, they rebounded pretty well, and Miami had a lead, and which is the first lead that Miami had since Florida State, I want to say. So in a solid month. And as we sit here today, it has been more than a month, and Miami has not won a game. And like you alluded to, Miami is not yet bowl eligible after 9 games. So who knows if that happens? So it was one of those things where, you're laughing and you're pointing at Florida State, but you got 3 or 4 fingers pointing back at yourself. So, not necessarily great, but we'll see.
For anybody out there watching the conversation, maybe you haven't seen the complete conversation. You joined us a little bit late. This video will post as soon as we're done. Then you can obviously check it out on my channel and watch the entire thing. I'm going to clip off just this segment, post it to the Mark Rogers TV Miami channel as well if you just want to see, bam, this complete segment. Cam, again, we take a lot of your time, so we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, it's always good, and it's good practice for me. And, hopefully we'll have better content or better feeling content, I should say, for me, because, I try to, do my best all the time. But, more positive thoughts, we'll say, on the Miami side moving forward. But, whether it's positive or negative, I've been here ever since my first day enrolling at Miami. I've been, blogging for 7-8 seasons now, and, running State of the U for a few. So a few seasons, that is, not a few days or anything, but we're there 24/7, 365. So stateoftheu.com. We have basketball stuff, we have football stuff, recruiting, and all kinds of things. So please stick with us, because I try to be pragmatic. I try to keep it real. So in storm or sunshine, I'll be here.
Absolutely. I know you love to cheer, but you do bring it down to the truth, as you always do. All right, Cam.
All right.
Thanks so much, man.
Anytime. I'll see you guys.
Enjoy the game this weekend.
All right.
All right, I'm going to stick around for just a few minutes. I'll take a call if anybody would like to call at 860-325-3687. Otherwise, I'll do a little analysis here and get us set up for the rest of the week. So this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So if you've joined us for a first time, or maybe you've stumbled across my channel a few times and want to know what we do, look at all the helmets. There they are. College football talk each and every day, 24/7, 365. As the kids like to say. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, where we bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation. You also get analysis from myself. You join the chat room, which is the self-proclaimed best chat room in college football, and we talk it up each and every day. So we do live streams here at Mark Rogers TV at 7 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesday night, and then throughout the day on Saturday with instant analysis throughout the day. So after the noon window, sometimes we jump on at around 3:15 to 3:30, break down the noon games. Then around 7 o'clock, look at that 3:30 window and get you set for the primetime games. And then post-game with a ton of calls coming in that we talk at college football playoff scenarios. And, of course, the games that we just watched throughout the day each and every Saturday here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Over on SG1 Sports, they've asked me to do live streams over there. And so I have obliged on a Friday at noon Eastern time, and also Sunday, the big weekend wrap-up, Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's me over at SG1 Sports with live streams on Friday and on Sunday. I try to give you as much content as I can throughout the week. I don't get to nearly as much as I would like to. Believe me, I could break this down from every conceivable angle, but I do deliver the top 25 that actually makes sense each and every Sunday. Then over the past few weeks, since the college football playoff rankings have been released on Tuesday night, I've given you a sneak preview on what I believe will be the rankings on Tuesday night. And then I typically come back and give you an analysis of those rankings, whether that be here during the live stream on Wednesday night or a separate video. Also, previews and predictions throughout the week. I have just knocked out my Michigan State, Ohio State preview and prediction. You can find that over on SG1 Sports. We'll be doing more previews and predictions here throughout the week, and my predictions released on Friday as well. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
How you doing, Mark? This is Carl. Carl in the comments.
Hey, Carl. How are you?
How you doing, my man?
I'm good.
I was the fan of like 2 weeks ago who was calling after the BC game, the Kings fan in distress.
Yes, I remember you well.
Yeah. I enjoyed the conversation you and Cam had. He made a lot of good points. A lot of points I agree with. A lot of points I agree with. But I just wanted to talk to you about, something other than Kane, something to get my mind off of. There's this conversation that I keep hearing analysts have, and it's a conversation I don't understand. They keep saying there's only one team. Now, after Alabama has this run roughshod through LSU and basically eliminated them from playoff contention, that Michigan can compete with Bama. And when I look at Michigan, I mean, they're like a LSU 2.0 on offense. I mean, I like Shea Patterson. I think he is better than Joe Barrows because he's more mobile and he's a bit more accurate. But their offense, I don't see them scoring enough points to keep up with Alabama. And their defense, when I look at Alabama's offensive line, they're going to lean on Rashawn Gary. They're going to lean on Winovich. They don't have the D tackle play like one of those big, I don't know, like pot roast, 400-pound nose tackles who can just squeeze two, the guard and center and close up two gaps at once. I don't see Michigan competing with Alabama when it does come time to compete for the championship, or if they meet in the Orange Bowl or the other New Year's Six Bowl.
So, Carl, I generally agree with you, but I think what happens by fans and media, especially when most of us are looking for a reason to bring Alabama down, to find a way to dethrone them, are sick of seeing them in the #1 position, is to go out and find somebody who can possibly compete and beat them. Now, Clemson would be the obvious choice. Georgia would be the second most obvious choice to me. And then I think that third team would be Michigan. It was Ohio State, just based on what we know of Urban Meyer and his track record, and Dwayne Haskins coming out week 1 and throwing the ball all over the field, and the recruiting. And we know that the roster's stacked. So Ohio State was the obvious choice, but obviously they've not played anywhere close to where they were supposed to. So it's Clemson, it's Georgia. Those two have proven in recent years with different personnel. Georgia most recently, obviously. Clemson, Deshaun Watson being the major factor in them keeping up with Alabama. So those would be the two programs that have kind of proved that at least on an occasion they've been able to stay with Alabama and maybe win the game. Michigan, I think people are just searching for somebody else. That's all I think that is. I agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. When I look at Nick Saban, I look at his career in totality. There's only a certain type of team that can really beat his teams, especially his Alabama team. That's why what I'm about to say, I know, the people in the comments are going to be like, oh, what's this guy talking about? And this may be outlier thinking, but I think only Oklahoma and possibly West Virginia are the two teams that can actually beat Alabama. And this is why I say it. Even though I know they don't have the defenses to even compete with Alabama's offenses. One, Oklahoma can score points, and they're used to already not playing defense. So they'll go into the game expecting to score 50. And two, Nick Saban has never, ever been able to shut down a quarterback that can scramble and pass. And when I look at Will Greer and I look at Kyler Murray, both of them can do that, and they're pinpoint accurate passers. So they can deal with the rush that Alabama's going to provide. And because their teams isn't necessarily predicated on, emphasizing the run, that will neutralize Alabama's D-line. So what they will do, I'm pretty sure they would throw screens all day, get those big hogs tired. So those are the two teams that I feel like can actually compete with Alabama. Michigan, you're going to try to play bully ball with the bully. It's not going to happen. Georgia, they're going to get beat down. We know what's going to happen. You can't Nick Saban.
Well, you're starting to break down matchups, which is smart, because it's about matchups as much as it is about talent. And while I believe Michigan's probably a better team than Oklahoma or West Virginia, you're right. They play the same style of football. They're LSU 2.0. You said it very, very nicely there, that I believe Michigan has better wide receiver play. Karan Higdon, I think, is a little bit better back than Nick Brissett. And as you mentioned, Shea Patterson brings a more mobile set to.
There I have to disagree with you, because
yep, go ahead.
Hollywood Brown and Courtney
Lamb. No. I said Michigan has a better wide receiver core than LSU, unless I misspoke.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, not Oklahoma. Not better than those guys. CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown and Trey Sermon, boy, he's an excellent back, and they lost Rodney Anderson, of course. But yeah, just how in the world is Oklahoma going to hold down that Alabama? See, Michigan could go out there and have a chance of matching up defensively. They're so much better on defense.
It's reverse thinking, because Oklahoma plays in the Big 12, so they're already accustomed to not playing defense. So Alabama's going to go out there and score 42 points, 49 points, a big deal. Oklahoma is used to scoring 50. They're used to having to put up points in order to win. So and Saban had, Kyler Murray would keep Saban up in the late month of December, because he would not be able to stop him. Because Kyler Murray is better than Johnny Manziel. When I look at Kyler Murray pass, he may be even better than Sean Watson.
Wow.
He's so accurate. I'm so
That's
serious.
a statement.
He's so accurate. When I look at Kyler Murray, he's so accurate. His ability to accelerate and stop, it's Vic S. It's Michael Vick S. literally. And then this is coming from a person who's a Miami fan. So usually, I don't hype up Big 12 schools because they don't play defense. But I'm just being honest. When I'm just looking out from the outsider's perspective, how would you stop him?
Well, I got to say that you're right in my evaluation of Kyler Murray. The games that I've seen him play, which I saw them play Iowa State, I saw the Texas game. That's most of what I've seen this year of Oklahoma. I'm trying to think who else. Yeah, I've been extremely impressed with him. I didn't expect him to be as polished a passer as he is. He's really good.
Me neither, but
yeah,
he's been trained. When you look at his coaches, he's been trained.
Yeah,
I mean, he was at Houston under what's his name, Tom Herman, which is now we know he's an offensive guru because once he left Ohio State, their offense went in the trash, and they just now have a pulse. And then he's been under Lincoln Riley, so he's been well groomed, and he's been sitting for 3 years, so he's been taught how to play properly. So he isn't going to make too many mistakes, and you see that occurring in his game. And his game is, even though it's very unorthodox, in that you don't necessarily see all the time. And even with Baker was more of a pocket passer than I think Kyler Murray is. Because Kyler Murray, once he sees that lane, he's gonna go, and his acceleration is special. It's special. His ability to accelerate and get to top speed is very unique. And that I feel like it would give Saban hell because it's been proven. Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, what's his name from last? I mean Baker Mayfield. Even they beat him in the Sugar Bowl. Who was national championship? Deshaun Watson. So that's why I feel like either West Virginia or Oklahoma because of the magnitude of that game, you never know what can happen. So maybe their defense shows up and they hold them to 35, and that'll be even more of a reason why I feel like Oklahoma in a one game, Muhammad Ali versus Frazier. What's Frazier?
Joe Frazier.
You never know. Yeah, Joe Frazier. You never know. And when I look at Michigan, and I look at Notre Dame, I'm sorry. It might be my Miami bias, but they're going to get beat first round in the playoffs. They are not going to the championship. Ian Book is not that good. So Notre Dame, I'm not even considering them. Too many close calls. They're giving us too many warnings. They're showing us they're not a championship team.
Well, you're giving us something to think about because I tend to side with strong physical play in the trenches and a defense, and Oklahoma doesn't give us that, although the offensive line's always very good. That Michigan just I'm not saying Michigan's going to compete with Alabama because, like you, when I look at Michigan, I see LSU. I see a little bit better LSU, but I see LSU. But man, the defensive back play from Michigan is extremely good, and man, it's just difficult for me to go with like an Oklahoma that's just not going to stop anybody, and then you put the perfect offense out there against them, and what in the world's going to happen? They're going to give up 3-play 80-yard drives constantly.
But they can build. That's the thing. It's kind of a reverse thinking. They're accustomed to it.
I understand it.
Panic.
I hear you.
If Georgia goes once Georgia goes down, once Georgia goes down 14 points, they're gonna abandon the run. They're gonna start passing. Once Michigan goes down 14 points, they're gonna abandon the run because they know they're just one touchdown away from being blown out. That's not the case with Oklahoma. They aren't going to panic. They're used to being down. Not down, but they're used to having to put points in order to even stay in games. So that level of thinking and that level of working in football, yes, it's unorthodox. Yes, you don't want to, but that's Big 12 football. Their conference is built on that, not playing defense. That's why we don't respect their conference the way it is now. Every game's going to 40 or 50 points. So if you tell Oklahoma, yes, you have to score 55 today in order to win, they'll be like, okay, it's another game. Let's go out there and let's get 14 a quarter. In the last quarter, let's do what we have to do.
You don't think Michigan somehow ekes out a 17-14 game?
No.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so either.
Even their running back, Hickman, I don't think he's that good either.
Yeah, I don't think he's anything special. No, he's not.
Let's think about what an Alabama defense would do to Michigan. By the third quarter, everybody would be, we'll be on a different channel. we'll just be, on here talking about when is, Nick Saban going to retire? What does Nick Saban have to prove? Why do this to ourselves?
So you want to see Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and somebody else. Who do you want to see that you think is going to be the most competitive playoff?
Okay, I'll go. I don't want to see Notre Dame in there. So one would be Alabama, two would be Clemson, three I would probably give Michigan. Let me see who else. Georgia, I don't think is going to make it. Notre Dame, I don't want them to go in there. Who else? Washington State would be a waste of my time. Even though they can put up points too, but they'll be a waste. And who else are contenders?
So you're drawing a big difference between Oklahoma and Washington State, and I get that. I understand that. Kyler Murray's so much better than
the quarterback play. I mean, I would think West Virginia, but they're gonna end up knocking each other out because won't they have to play, right? They have to play.
Yeah, they both have one loss and they got to play 2 times. So yeah, and the Oklahoma skilled players are so much better. Oklahoma can actually mount a running game with Trey Sermon. Washington State doesn't even bother running. They're awful trying to run the football, and their wideouts are not dynamic like CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown. Yeah. No comparison there.
Exactly.
Here
West Virginia can be off at times.
The wild card team I'm going to bring up, and this is just strictly speaking about talent, that this team could go and they could play any of the teams that you just mentioned. Well, throw out Washington State. I'm talking about, is Ohio State. They could lose to Alabama 51-17 or whatever score you want to pick, or it could come together. But if you're just talking about sending athletes out onto a field, you may want them out there before Notre Dame, Washington State, a number of other teams you could mention.
I agree. My biggest problem and why I would have put them in the top 4, I don't think they're going to be Michigan.
Oh, I'm not talking about a scenario. I'm just talking about if you just get to choose whatever 4 teams you want to see play each other. No, I'm not talking about a real life scenario. I'm talking about just pick 3 teams that could play with Alabama that have the best chance on a particular day. And I think Clemson and Georgia are the obvious choices. And you make a good case for Oklahoma. Ohio State would be just a complete wild card. We don't know if they're going to ever pull it together. Maybe this team's just never going to do it. They don't appear to be able to do it. Yeah, I hear you. It's kind of a sad state of affairs in college, but I just don't like to see this. It almost looks inevitable.
You don't have to tell. I'm tired. I mean, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I also do have some animosity toward Nick Saban. But I mean, you don't have to. I cannot wait until the day this dynasty is done because. It's ridiculous. It's half a decade. I mean, this is a decade now. I've never seen anything like this ever. And when I speak to people older than me, I'm 23 years old, so I'm pretty young. But when I speak, they tell me they never seen this either.
No.
This run. I mean, even the Hurricanes. I'm a Hurricane alum. That's why I'm a Hurricane fan. Even at their most dominant times, for 20 years, but we weren't in the championship game every year. We were just in a championship discussion every year. But Alabama's literally in the championship game every year, or if not, a game away from being in the championship game. It's ridiculous. Yes. And to think about, I mean, I know a little bit about college football history. I know back in the days, they had unlimited scholarships. This man is doing this under current rules, and stipulations with the 85 scholarships. He's putting kids through gray shirts, and these kids are actually, I'm like, wow. I'm like, this man is squeezing the lemon. He's getting everything he can out of the system. And Alabama is just he's in the perfect storm because you have a state that, no disrespect, but football's there, everything, also you consider it being the South. So they put the resources in it. So they're not really 100% serious about being in academia. They'd rather be an athletic school. This is one of the things that hurt Miami is that we always want to be in the top 30 or 40 in academic institutions. when you look at Alabama, you know, I was reading I don't know if you read it, the Forbes list, the top 25 most profitable college football programs, and I was surprised to find out Alabama isn't even number one, but they're in the top 5.
Who released that? Where can I find that?
Forbes. You can find that on Forbes magazine.
Okay.
Yeah, Texas A&M is number one, and I didn't know they were. I mean, they print money over there. I understand how they gave Jimbo so much money. But I mean, wow! When you look at Alabama, I mean, it's time for the dynasty to be done. The NFL team needs to offer him a Gruden contract.
Yeah, it is amazing that since 2010, the end of that season, basically these are the only three incidents that have stopped Alabama from winning national championships. Number one would be that crazy kick six against Auburn, where they were playing on the road and the crazy kick six. So Auburn needed a miracle to knock them out of, and I know we have to assume Alabama would have won the SEC championship game in the national title, but they would have. So, or that would have been a great BCS championship game with Jameis Winston and Florida State taking on Alabama, which it was a really good game with Auburn there as well. But anyway, so it took a. It would have taken a crazy kick six miracle play, 103 yards or whatever it was. It took basically an Ohio State team that, if you look at the personnel, it was basically an NFL team. It took their best team put together at the same time, and then it took Deshaun Watson playing out of his mind 2 years in a row, and the second time around, he and those NFL wide receivers, you know, Mike Williams, Hunter Renfrow, my mind's going blank on the other kid, the amazing receiver they had anyway, and just making, they had on their last couple drives of that game, Mike Williams and they had Jordan Leggett, and I don't know why I'm blanking out on the other receiver, Artavis Scott. Anyway, a host of receivers just basically making plays on the ball against the DB, and that saved them. Them high pointing the ball, out fighting the DB on about 5 throws, and they won the national title. Alabama lost the national title by 1 second. With 1 second on the clock, they lost it. So those are the 3 occurrences in 9 years that have denied them of winning a national title. Other than that, they've won all the national titles. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's really something to just look at in amazement, because in a sport which is, you know, kind of creates parity on its own, unlike basketball. You know, college football at the top, there should be parity. You know, it should be at least 5 teams that can compete with each other. When you look at Alabama, year in, year out, they always have the best team. And when you look at it this year, it's like, oh my God, like God must have favor on this team, because he blessed them with Tua Tagovailoa. Of all the things they didn't need, they got it. A quarterback, a legit NFL throwing quarterback. This man is a playmaker. This man is a playmaker. And then when you look at their backfield, I mean, Alabama is such a talented team. They don't even start their best running back. Najee Harris is a better running back than Damian Harris. They don't even start their best running back.
As a running back, he's better. I don't know if he's got a better complete game. I think they like how Damian picks up blitzes and he can slide out of the backfield and catch a pass or two. But, yeah, Najee Harris is a better running back. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at Najee Harris, I mean, he's 6'1", 230, 240. And then I saw him make one cut. It was in the beginning of the game, like, the second series Alabama second. He made one cut. And I'm like, wow, this guy's going to be a stud in the NFL. You can just see it. Because you shouldn't be that big and that nimble. You should not be that spry. And Alabama just has him right there standing on left bench while their senior running back is going. I'm like, wow. I mean, this is. I mean, I don't know if they're better than the 2001 Hurricanes. I don't think so, but they're close. They deserve consideration. They're the first team that you can actually choose consideration.
Yeah. It is something else. Well, we'll see if somebody can help somehow play the game of their lives on one particular night And like I was talking about the other nights, Alabama's going to have to show up with its C- game. And I guess it's only Clemson and Georgia. And you think Oklahoma possibly with their A+ game. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take, if you're into college basketball history, it's going to take, Georgetown, Villanova. It's going to take NC State, Houston, that type of deal.
Yeah. Yep.
Although that happens.
Hey, man,
yeah.
I enjoy your channel. I enjoy your content.
Thanks, Carl.
I appreciate everything you do. And I started following your Hurricane page also. So I appreciate everything you do, man. Keep up the good work, man. God bless, all right?
Thanks for the support. God bless you as well, sir.
All right.
As a 23-year-old Miami Hurricanes fan who obviously watches all the college football, commenting on Bama dominance. That's what it is. Maybe we'll put it in perspective during the off season and do a video and go through the ages and look at some of the great dynasties in college football. I know many of you are commenting on the most recent of those, which would be pre-Miami or pre-Alabama is Miami. All right. To get us set right here, Mark Rogers TV, voice of college football, live streams Wednesday night and also all day Saturday with instant analysis over at SG1 Sports, Friday at noon Eastern time, and we wrap up the weekend Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. I am going to get to work on previews and predictions that are going to be posted right here and also at SG1 Sports as well. I mentioned a few other times for anybody who's interested in the channel, and I don't mean just to watch college football videos. That's the reason you're here. I get that. We produce college football videos, and if all you want to do is talk college football and watch college football and debate it, that's why we're here. And we love having you, and we appreciate your time. But if you have a little bit more investment in regards to the channel and our vision and what we'd like to do and want to give input and suggestions in what we should do and want to hear me talk about my thoughts about what we can do going forward to make this much better than it is right now and more viable and sustainable and all those things, I am setting up a live stream at some point, but I want to make that discussion available to as many of you who care. And if you don't care, believe me, I'm not offended at all. I just want you here for the college football discussion. That's the reason we're here. So I get it. You don't want to necessarily hear about all this other stuff. But there are a few of you out there that do, that are invested in the channel and certainly have great insight into what we should be doing to increase the subscriber rate exponentially and bring views and bring likes and comments and blow this up and get to Instagram and Facebook and do all these other things and would have great suggestions. So I'm going to set up a live stream where we will not talk about college football. We are only going to talk about Mark Rogers TV. And I'm going to set up a live stream. And so this is what I want you to do. If you're interested in joining that live stream, please leave dates and times, days of the week that you would be most available. And I want to make it available to as many people as possible. All right. So we'll get back to that at some point. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. Where's my guy, man? How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. You had to love that last caller talking about the Crimson Tide.
Oh, yeah. I love it. He actually seemed to know what he was talking about for the most part. So, I totally empathize with anyone else. I mean, if I was sitting on this side watching Ohio State or, Miami or something, doing the same thing, I would almost certainly have the same feeling.
Reasonable Gump, who would be the worst team for you to see have this type of dominance and have to be watching it yourself? Would it be Auburn or would it be somebody else?
It would not be Auburn because they're SEC, so that I would at least have that. It's interesting. That's an interesting question. As far as the actual school, it would be most painful to watch. It'd probably be Notre Dame.
Okay.
Because they're like they're like, as far as like historic greatness,
yeah,
they're probably the closest to Alabama. So I don't want them catching up. As far as disliking of personnel or head coaches, I really don't like either Jim Harbaugh or Urban Meyer. I won't go too much into that because I'm not sure about your feelings on either of them. But
But so on a more personal level, it'll probably be those two, Michigan and Ohio State.
Okay. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, man, I forgot. I didn't forget. I couldn't call in Saturday night because my work hours got shifted around. So I'm working early in the morning now on the weekends. So just had to pretty much watch that game and then go straight to bed. But it was a good game. I caught the first half of your live show the next day, and it's I knew we were going to win. I actually underestimated my team. I predicted a 20-point win.
Most of us did.
Yeah. But I got to say that it felt good not just to win, but to that's the defense I wanted to see. I've been wanting to see that all year, and I liked your point about how you can't really, or maybe we shouldn't judge how the defense has been playing because they never really kind of felt like they had to.
Yeah,
that's definitely one way to look at it. Although I got to be devil's advocate and, as my name suggests, reasonable here, and also say that that a defense can have just a really good game sometimes, and we may see them go out there and give up 30 points to Mississippi State. I don't think it's going to happen, but it is possible. We'll know here in a couple days. But I do think it's telling that Devin White made absolutely no difference at all in that game. And what was amusing to me to watch was that entire first half, all you kept hearing about was Gary Danielson saying, "Oh, man, this is a play that Devin White would have been all over. Oh, Devin White would have called this, and he's the leader out there. They only would have had him." You heard his name at the beginning of the second half when they mentioned him coming out on the field, and you never heard his name again. So this whole conspiracy theory of how they took him out because of a targeting call and they wanted to make sure that he couldn't play against Alabama for at least half the game. Think about it what you want. If you really think that kind of thing's going on in college football, I really don't have anything to say to you. But the bottom line is it didn't make any difference at all. Alabama was the same team. I think they scored 2 touchdowns in the first and the second half. The only difference was they had a field goal in the first half. And that was it. Alabama was just a completely better team than LSU. LSU's defense actually played very good. They held Alabama to less points than I thought they would have scored. And I think anyone, quite honestly, thought they would have scored. 29 points is about what you can realistically expect a good defense to hold Alabama to, as long as Tua is healthy and is playing for that game.
With no help from the offense as well.
And it was, you're right, it was actually kind of painful to watch LSU just struggle and by the skin of their teeth make a first down.
Oh my goodness. It was never like, oh, here's an 8-yard run and then a 14-yard pass and then a 12-yard pass and okay, we're out to midfield and then it bogged down. It was always like, we got a 3-yard run, then we swung out a pass for 5 and it's 3rd and 3 and then we just made it by 3 inches. We got a first down. It was every first down they got, it just felt like they just barely made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
My goodness.
I think that was a large part in due to Alabama just never letting up the pressure the entire game. I have been kind of saying all along that while I've been high on LSU since before the season even started, that quarterback was just not one that was going to be able to match up well against any team that tries to play Alabama's game. That's a tough, physical, pro-style offense with a more or less game-managing quarterback. Obviously, different this year, but anyone who tries to play that game just doesn't ever do it. I mean, people might argue that Auburn did it these past few years. like you alluded to in the last call, that it took a miracle 2 games ago or the 2 wins ago to do it. Last year, Auburn really wasn't doing just a straight at you pro style, run and gun and then throw a pass here and there. They were doing a lot more misdirection, tricky kind of plays. Even their runs were like, it made it look like you were going to go one way, but then they just flipped around and went the other way. And so yeah, that was just a suffocating performance. I gotta say, and this is about the only topic I will somewhat agree with on the infamous LSU caller, who I won't go into naming right now, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. This is about the only thing I'll sort of agree with him on. I don't want to see Tua play in any second half pretty much until Georgia, because there is definitely something wrong with his knee. I thought it would have been fixed for this 2-week break we had. It obviously wasn't. I mean, he didn't even really get hit in the knee, and he just ran for a touchdown, and somehow at the end of it, he's limping off the field. So I don't know what's going on, but just, I mean, hell, in the I think it's Temple or Citadel or something. That game, hell, don't even play him at all. I mean, the goal I think right now for Alabama should be to get to the playoffs.
Sure.
Technically, we could lose. We could drop a regular season game.
Yeah.
Go beat Georgia, and we're in the playoffs.
Sure.
Now, I am not one of those fools out there who are saying that. And when I say fools, I'm including a bunch of television people who, for some reason, seem to think this, but who think that Alabama can go lose to Georgia and make it to the playoffs. That's ridiculous. Maybe if Notre Dame wasn't hogging a spot, maybe, but since they are, there's just no way that's going to happen. So,
but it would be fascinating, Reasonable Gump, if they lost a classic game to Georgia. Yeah, if they go out there and lose 27-10, but if they, nobody can imagine them possibly losing by more than a field goal to Georgia. But if they lose 31-28 to Georgia, and they look the part the rest of the season against Mississippi State and Auburn, just like they did against LSU, and there's a bunch of one-loss conference champions out there, it's going to be excruciatingly difficult, I bet, for that committee to pull the trigger and not take them.
And I know you said you would like to see the committee squirm to do that. But to be honest, man, as an Alabama fan, I wouldn't want them to get in. I don't want to get in like that.
That's very honorable of you.
I felt guilty last year about getting in the way we did. I did. I didn't feel it was mitigated a little bit by the fact that I honestly do feel that it was just kind of that making the best out of a bad situation. I really didn't think there was another team more deserving, so I kind of thought, we're just kind of like we kind of have to put them in.
Yep.
Because I honestly do feel that Ohio State disqualified themselves with that ridiculous loss to Iowa. That is my honest opinion.
Were you watching me at the time? Were you? Had you found my channel?
I did go back and see your video and watch your video after that, where you literally said they played themselves out of the playoffs. So,
where I said Ohio State after they lost to Iowa.
Yeah, your analysis video after that, you had gone ahead and said that they played themselves out of the playoffs.
Which
was before the championship,
which I was more accurate than which I was more accurate than I recollect. I was campaigning for Ohio State to make. So if you can understand this thinking, Reasonable Gump, I said after the championship weekend that Alabama was better than Ohio State. I also said that I would put Ohio State in the playoff because I would honor the conference championship. And people couldn't make sense out of that. And I get it, but I don't think any committee or any one person can say, I am all knowing and I'm going to select the 4 best teams. I'm all about the resume. And I just thought Ohio State had a better resume than Alabama. I picked Alabama to beat Clemson. I picked them to beat Georgia. So I thought that they were the best team. I just thought Ohio State should have been selected. Now, obviously, I understood why they weren't selected. I just didn't think, and I think we've had this conversation, so I'll keep it short. I just don't think that the weight of the wins were given the same consideration as the weight of the losses for Ohio State, because they had really good wins on their resume. But this would be a different situation, because obviously Ohio State had 2 losses, so that made it more understandable, versus Alabama getting in this year as a 1-loss non-conference champion versus other 1-loss conference champions. That's the big difference.
Well, and let me go ahead and say this. If Ohio State had lost a close game to Iowa, and it really could be just looked at as one of those, wow, the ball bounced the other way type games, I probably would have just said, go ahead and put Ohio State in. I honestly think the committee would have done it. I really don't think. I really think their thinking was, we really can't forgive that.
And I understand that. I understand that.
And the thing is, I understand the conference championship thing too, and sometimes I even kind of lean toward it. But I also don't think it should be like a prerequisite when there's only 4 teams, because then you might run into a situation where you're choosing between maybe what if someone from the Big Ten West had won it instead, and they have 4 losses?
Yeah, I'd put them in the playoff.
Okay.
And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I would honor conferences. That's why I wouldn't have this ridiculous system with 5 conferences plus Notre Dame and 4 spots. That's why I wouldn't do it.
Oh yeah, well, hey, you and I are on the same page. If we can bump it up to 6 or 8 teams, then I am all for it. Conference champions, automatic wins. We have a couple wild cards for really good teams, and mostly everyone's happy. I think you and I are on the same page. I just can't come down to the automatic or the prerequisite champions when there's only 4 spots.
Under this system. I get it.
Agree. It's just a flawed system right now. Now, moving on to this year,
sure.
Like I said, it's not going to happen if Alabama loses to Georgia. I really don't think we will, although I also want people to get off this narrative about how Alabama's an automatic in. They're going to be, Georgia shouldn't even show up to the championship. Listen, Georgia already has the revenge factor for them, all right? Alabama literally snatched a victory right from under their noses.
Yeah.
I mean, it could not have been any more meaning, give more meaning to that phrase. They already have that revenge factor. They don't need an not respected factor as well. So I know me saying that's not going to stop anyone, but I just wanted to say that. But anyway, no, there's just going to be too many other teams that I feel the playoff committee would be obligated to go select than a 12-1 Alabama who couldn't win their championship. I realize that a loss to Georgia is probably better than like Oklahoma losing to Texas. If you wanted to look at the grand scheme of things, they would both be 12-1. Alabama has a better loss, but I just don't think you could justify it. And if we did get in, I wouldn't feel good about it. So.
Well,
yeah,
there doesn't have to be chaos ensue for Alabama to get that bid without the conference championship. Just get somebody to lose in the Big Ten, whether it be the Big Ten Western Division winner wins the championship, or Ohio State goes out and loses this week against Michigan State, but then they beat Michigan or something like that, and you've knocked out a conference. And then the same thing with West Virginia and Oklahoma splitting 2 games. Or nobody considers these other teams could win games against those 2. West Virginia's already lost to Iowa State by 2 scores. They're not infallible. They're not unbeatable. Like we look at these conferences and we just think, okay, well, it's Oklahoma and West Virginia. They're both going to have 1 loss and play each other. You know, these teams can lose games, other games to be considered. So as soon as that would happen, then you open it wide open to a scenario, even if there's no more chaos than those 2 conferences, Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, and then it's down between I don't think Washington State's going to run the table in the Pac-12. They're not good enough, I don't think, to beat a couple other good teams in a Pac-12 championship game and Washington the last game of the regular season. I think they'll lose again. But even if they don't, I would be fascinated to see the committee have to determine between a one-loss Washington State Pac-12 champion and an Alabama one-loss non-conference champion. I got to think they're taking Alabama.
In that particular case, yeah, I think they would. And that one I wouldn't feel too bad about. But that's only because the Pac-12 is just really that bad. I actually think the ACC might be just as bad, if not worse. But they happen to have the credit of having
the one team,
second best
team
in the country.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the ACC's been riding one team for a long time. Now they were pretty good a couple years a couple years ago, but it's basically been Florida State and now Clemson just holding up that entire conference.
Yeah, Clemson, the orange and purple upstarts. That's what I'm calling them. I think are you surprised with how many ACC teams are ranked though? I'm kind of missed by it. I think Syracuse is really highly ranked, like overly so.
So I don't know why this struck me today, but I counted, okay, we've got 3 undefeated teams in the Power 5, 3 in the Power 5, and then we've got, I think I counted 6 one-loss teams. You know what's a real oddity, an anomaly statistically, is that there are only 2. There's only like 4 two-loss teams in the entire country. Like the Big Ten, Ohio State, Michigan have 1 loss. Then it drops to 3 losses for everybody else. In the Pac-12, Washington State has 1 loss. Then it drops to 3 losses for everybody else. In the Big 12, West Virginia and Texas or Oklahoma have 1 loss. Everybody else, it drops to 3 losses. It's only Kentucky and LSU, and then it's Syracuse and NC State, which I can't imagine they're going to stay with 2 losses. But yeah, I just thought that was a little statistical anomaly there. But yeah, so the ACC has Clemson and then a bunch of teams on the back end. Yeah, Syracuse is up to 13. That team's the 13th best team in the country, I can't imagine. I'd like to see them play Mississippi State and some other teams like that. I've got Mississippi State ranked ahead of Syracuse myself, but that's me.
Yeah, I would have had Mississippi State in it. I wouldn't have Mississippi State. Well, okay. I'd say I wouldn't have Mississippi State ahead of the 20s because of the numerous disappointing losses they have. I think I commented that on your video, but then I had to also take a look at the country as a whole and realize,
yeah,
you know what, Mississippi State played most teams in the country that are not SEC. They probably win. And
yeah,
that's another thing. So many people were unhappy with the LSU getting the 7th spot, and I just said, hey, while you're whining about that, ask yourselves, those 3 one-loss teams that they're ahead of, if LSU played them each individually, who do you think would win? And I think, because who was that? Ohio State, West Virginia that they're ahead of, and
yeah, Washington State.
More. Washington State, yeah. I would take LSU out to 2 out of 3 of those on a neutral field.
Oh, I would take
and in no particular ones.
In a heartbeat, I would take them over Washington State. And they would win that game decidedly, and only because it's LSU and because they're not explosive on offense would they not just crush them. They would win like a very workmanlike, 27-16 game or something like that against Washington State. But I would be fully confident. It's almost like when the SEC bowl matchups come out in postseason play. There's about 3 of them that I'm like, I can't get to my computer fast enough and look at the lines and grab, like when LSU played Louisville with Lamar Jackson, and everybody talked about what a great matchup that was going to be. I was like, LSU is going to shut him down to nothing. This game is going to be, this game's got like 24-10 written all over it. And that's what it was. And LSU was like it was like a pick 'em game, where they were like a 2-point favorite. I'm like, give me that game. So, yeah.
And to be honest, Pac-12 teams have not fared good against the SEC at all. It's rare that they play, but when they do, they just don't know what it's like to go up against SEC defenses.
Yeah,
every time
it's too
LSU
physical.
played with the Pac-12 team, maybe when they played Oregon, a bunch of years ago, and this is when Oregon was,
sure.
This is when Oregon was on top of the world. They couldn't do anything against. They had never seen something like that before.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I would take LSU in a heartbeat, or every time over Washington State. I would take LSU probably 6 out of 4 or 6 out of 10 games over Ohio State right now.
Yeah.
And
they're just
I might split the difference with 5-5 with West Virginia, only because Big 12 offenses do have success against SEC teams.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, hey, I mean, I want to ask you just something completely unrelated here before I go.
Okay.
It's just something I'm really curious, because I heard you guys talk about dynasties. Can you please help me understand why Alabama's dynasty keeps getting compared to the USC's under Pete Carroll? Because I want to know, A, why is it even considered a dynasty? They won one national championship, 2004. So why is it a dynasty, first of all? And B, even if for the amount of years that they were good and relevant and always in the discussion, still nowhere near an entire decade. So maybe you can help a simple Alabama guy out here, and just what is it? What's so special about the Pete Carroll era?
So the Pete Carroll era for me, it took him a year to get going, and his last year was pretty dismal by USC standards, by his standards. So it ran from 2002 through 2008. So the 2002 team lost twice. They beat Iowa pretty badly in the Orange Bowl. They had the Heisman Trophy winner, Carson Palmer, but they didn't come close to winning a national title. They finished in the top 5. They were really good, but it really kicked in 2003. So you can almost give them a national title and a half. They split that year with LSU. Of course, LSU won the game, the BCS championship game, and the Pac 10, 12, I guess it was 12 at the time. And was it still 10? Yeah. Until Utah. Yeah, exactly. The big expansion about 2012-ish. Yeah. So so the Pac-10 and the Big 10 were out of the equation at the time. And they played in the Rose Bowl against Michigan, and they claimed half the national championship. And then they, of course, won it, annihilating Adrian Peterson and company in 2004, 55-19. So that gives them some cachet, is just the nature at which they won that national title. Bama hasn't generally done that, except for the Notre Dame game. The rest of them were.
The Texas game was also double digits, but it was double digits.
But they had to score late. That game was trying to think of the final score of that game.
Just an absolute drubbing from the get-go.
That game was 24-21 with like 5 minutes left. The Texas game. Go look that up. It got to like 24-21 with 5 or 6 minutes left in the game.
I know. I was there.
And then they tacked on a couple touchdowns. You were at the game. Okay.
I was in the marching band at that point, so I got to try.
Very nice. That's awesome.
Yep.
Quite the experience, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, when we were out there were a lot of USC fans telling us they were rooting for us because of what Texas did to them in 2005.
Okay. Little did they know what was starting. What was at the outset.
Yeah. Sure, they probably take it back now.
Absolutely.
It was interesting to me also to see Alabama fans had adopted the upside down hook 'em horns sign when they were out there.
Yeah, so the people that defend the Pete Carroll era, and there's little to defend, it was dominant, but they just had a bunch of near misses is what they had. Again, the 2002 team finished in the top 5. Then they won a split national championship, but they didn't get to compete for the national championship. Then in 04, they did win the national title. In 05, they were the heavy favorite. I think the number was like 17 against Texas, but they did not complete the deal. Then they come back in 06, and they had some crazy like Friday night, Thursday night loss against Oregon State that derailed them. They didn't quite get there. And again, they finished like third or fourth in the nation with one loss. They beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. They had the same thing happen to them in 07. I don't have the game results in front of me, but they tripped up against somebody else again in 07, and they go on. They win the Rose Bowl. They finish 12-1. They don't quite get it done, and LSU and Ohio State are playing in the national title game. 08, same thing happened to them. They didn't get to play in the national title game because they tripped up somewhere. And they won the Rose Bowl again in 2008. They won 3 straight Rose Bowls, but they lost somewhere in the season that derailed them. They were like that close to being a dynasty, but I don't consider. Now, if you want to like say the Jim Tressel Ohio State teams were Big Ten dynasties, yes, they were. They kept winning the Big Ten. Those Pete Carroll teams were Pac-12 dynasties, but they were not national dynasties. No, it was not a you have to win the whole thing to be a dynasty.
Yeah,
repeatedly.
It makes more sense when you're explaining it to me how okay, so when hindsight looking at it, it's like these were teams that were drubbing everybody in their path and just had to slip up along the way. That happened to matter a whole lot. I get it. I don't understand. I don't understand why people recognize the 03 team as splitting a title. I kind of think when you actually have a national title game, then that's it. There aren't any split titles. Whoever wins that game gets it. I understand it before we had a national title game where it's just 2 different polls, each making their own decisions over, just based off the regular and the postseason. But when you actually have a national title game, I don't understand why another team gets to claim. I mean, I guess I should understand it because Central Florida did the same thing last year. But in any case, in my view, they only have one national title as far as in the Pete Carroll era. But I do. But I see what you're talking about now. How it was more just the seasons overall. They were just crushing almost everybody in their path, and just like you said, had a bunch of near misses.
Yeah, and that's the way they were looked at every year, was like, oh, shouldn't USC be there? Like I'm looking at this is going to bring back like I'm going to be able to, if I can get to the game scores. So again, in 02, they win the Orange Bowl. They finish in the top 5. 03, they split the national title. They beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. 04, they beat Oklahoma to win the national title. 05, they lose the famous Texas game. Okay, so this is 06, 7, and 8. This is what could have completed a dynasty. This is exactly what I'm pointing out right here. Here's the game. This is in 06. They win all their games. They beat a slew of ranked teams. Nebraska, Stanford, Oregon, Cal, Notre Dame, Michigan in the Rose Bowl, who was number 3 in the country. They slipped up on a Friday night at Oregon State, 31-33. So
I was in my college dorm room watching that. I remember that. And Oregon State was a terrible team. Oh, at the time, they ended up winning a lot of games after that. I think they went to a decent bowl, if I'm not mistaken. But they weren't a USC caliber team.
No. So they let's see. This is 06. So that was the Florida Ohio State game. USC. You could argue Ohio State was the only undefeated team. Florida got in by way of the SEC championship and the BCS formula. USC finished number 3. So there could be an argument, well, they only lost one game just like Florida. If it was a playoff system, they're in the playoff. They're playing Florida in the first round of the playoff, a 2-3 game. But instead, they didn't get an opportunity.
Was that also the year when it was like Ohio State, Michigan 1 and 2, and some people wanted a rematch?
Yes.
Okay, and they ended up deciding on Florida. Okay.
Yes. And then in 07, we're going to see the same. You know what? In 07, they actually lost 2 games. They lost, so no pass for them here, or no argument. They lost to Stanford 24-23. I wonder if that was the famous 41-point, where they were a 41-point favorite. I think it is. And then they lost to Oregon, who was number 5 in the country, 24-17. Then they went on and won the Rose Bowl against Illinois, which they didn't even face the best team in the Big. They didn't even face like the 3rd or 4th best team in the Big Ten, because there was all this crazy, like Ohio State went to the title game and other teams went other places, and they faced Illinois, who was awful, and they killed them in the Rose Bowl. And then the only other year was Pete Carroll's last really good team was in 08. And, oh, man, Oregon State did it to him again. No wonder I just mentioned Oregon State, because it was twice. At Oregon State, week 3, they were number 1 in the country, and they lost to Oregon State, an unranked Oregon State team, 27-21. But otherwise, they beat everybody else. They beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl by 2 touchdowns, and they finished number 3 in the country. So
those are those years when one loss really mattered.
Usually, yeah. Yeah, so...
Because, 2008, it was Oregon State, and then the year after that, they lost to Washington by a last-second field goal. And then after that, the year after that, they actually it was the same exact thing, except this time it was to Washington State. I remember that, but I think there were more losses in there. I just remember turning on the TV and watching Washington kick a last-second field goal to win 2009.
Yeah, so Pete Carroll, again, take out years 1 and then the final year, which were 6-6 and 9-4. He goes 11-2, 12-1, 13-0, 12-1, 11-2, 11-2, 12-1. You know, he finishes in the polls number 4, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 3. So that's why people look back on it as
it's kind of like the Bobby Bowden State mentality,
sure,
where they only won 2 titles in their 14 years, but they never left the top 4 or 5.
Top 4.
One of the 2. Okay. Yeah. All right. So it's kind of the same thing.
If you look at Jim Tressel's run at Ohio State, you're going to see something pretty similar.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Number 1, 4, 20, then 4, 2, 5, 9, 5, 5.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The thing that the dark mark on Jim Tressel's run at Ohio State was they had a lot of trouble winning the bowl games, like the big bowl games.
Well, people think that. People think that. You know what? That perception reigns is because they lost after they beat Miami in 2002 to win the national championship. The next 2 BCS championship games, they lost to Florida and LSU. But other than that, their record in BCS bowl games was 5-3 under Jim Tressel.
Because they also lost to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. If I'm
No,
not mistaken,
they
a little bit later.
Beat Oregon in the Rose Bowl.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah. Like when you mentioned LSU beating Oregon and slapping Oregon across the face and, you know, giving them a punch in the mouth that they weren't used to, these Ohio State games came to mind too, because Ohio State's played Oregon twice in games in which they were an underdog. And I didn't really I was much like the LSU matchups that you were theoretical matchups in against Louisville that we talked about, had the same thought about Ohio State. Well, Ohio State's going to show up and they've got an NFL roster. And if you would look at these 2 rosters 5 years from now, you would see Ohio State's got 40 NFL players and Oregon's got like 11. So I was pretty confident that these 2 games would turn out the way they did. And Ohio State beat them by double digits both games.
Maybe I'm thinking of another team, but I'm certain that I'm remembering an Ohio State-Oregon Rose Bowl where the Ohio State quarterback tried to spike the ball, but the clock ran out because it was only on 1 second. I'm certain I'm remembering that.
Oh, you're thinking of Russell Wilson with Wisconsin. Yep. Against Oregon.
Wisconsin?
That was 2011, the 2012 Rose Bowl.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, Wisconsin and Ohio State have very similar colors. Maybe that's why I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's Russell Wilson.
Okay.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about his one season at Wisconsin. Yeah, he took them to the Rose Bowl.
Well, so you only need one really good season to get drafted. Just look at Cam Newton.
Yeah. Well, Russell Wilson actually was ACC Player of the Year at North Carolina State. Just nobody was paying much attention until he got to play in some bigger games. But, yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
All right,
man,
sir.
Well, this has been fun. Memory lane, man.
Definitely.
I'm sure you probably want to get going. So I'll let you
yeah,
go.
I think I'm going to wrap this thing up. So thanks for the call. Enjoy the games this weekend, and call back if you get a chance.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll catch you soon.
Everyone liked the video.
Thank you so much for that. Reasonable Gump reminding everyone to like the video. Thank you. So yes, I could run through, as Reasonable Gump said there, memory lane. So Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, will be back throughout the week. I can't name exactly the times that I'll release videos throughout the week, but get you set with Week 11 previews and predictions here, then also at SD1 Sports, where I'm contractually obligated to supply 3 previews and predictions for him, and also a couple live streams throughout the week on Friday and Sunday there at SD1 Sports, Wednesday night and all day Saturday here. And so thanks so much for joining us. And again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you have interest in the channel, and I mean not just to watch college football and discuss and debate, but interest in supporting the channel, just in regards to your input and your engagement, we're going to set up a live stream where we're just going to talk about the channel itself. Obviously, I can't control what you do in the live chat. So if you guys jump on here and talk about college football, but that's not what I'm intending. I'm intending to set up a live stream just to talk about the channel, my vision, my thoughts, my plans, and then also to get input from you and for us to talk it up. So what I need you to do is in any of the comments sections, not in the live chat because I'll lose that, in the comments section of any of the videos, just leave days and times that you would be available most of the time, and I'll try to find a good time for all of us to get together to talk up the channel. All right, everyone, I appreciate it. We've been on a long time. We're looking at 3 hours, so I think I'm going to take a little bit of time off, and we will be back with more previews and predictions throughout the week and our live streams on Saturday, and who knows, maybe a little bit before then, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. See you guys next time.